Hello everybody, I hope you can hear me. I hope everything is let's try it again. Can everybody hear me? We're having a few technical issues this morning. So not least that my MacBook decided to do an update 10 minutes before we were due to go live, and hey ho. So welcome to this morning, welcome to the Interesting Modelling Co. Festival of Modelling, or Farcical of Modelling as it's turning out to be at the moment. We have a full day of events for you. We're kicking off in a couple of minutes with Drew Manton, who will be working on his Spezza Hercules, and we've got other bits and pieces coming up throughout the day. We have Mr. Spencer Pollard around about 12:45. We'll be doing a look at the new Italeri 32nd scale Tornado, and we'll be having other people popping along. The schedule's up on the Facebook page, and obviously you take part as well. You can post up whatever projects you're working on this weekend and put them up on our Facebook page or on our Twitter feed, and we'll try and incorporate some of them into the live shows as we're going along. So without further ado, whilst I try and recover the technical aspects in the background here, it's always going to happen, I'll hand over to Drew, who should be...
Good morning.
Good morning, Drew. You okay? Everything okay? Sound okay and everything?
Yeah, everything's fine my end, John. So I think we better just get me full screen, and then you go away and sort your technical issues, because I've sorted mine remarkably enough.
Yes. Well,
no, that wasn't actually a criticism. That was a reflection on computers and how unpredictable they can be.
Oh no, they can be predictable. It's just they know when they're going to do things. They don't just tell us. Right, in that case, then I will hand over to Drew Manton, and I'll probably pop back in about 20 minutes' time to feed through some of your comments and things. So don't think Drew is ignoring you. He's just going to be concentrating on the build.
Yeah, just to clarify,
I'll pop in at the 20-minute and the 40-minute mark and just feed in some of the comments to Drew. And if you've got any questions, then fire away. So without further ado, let's kick off the Festival of Modelling. And so we'll hand over to Mr. Drew Manton.
Well, good morning, everybody. Drew here. I just want to clarify something John just said. I don't actually have the comments on screen here, because what I don't want to do is be too distracted while I'm trying to talk by comments. So John's going to look at some comments and feed some through to me at some points, but I won't actually be actively looking at the comments as they come up. I'm sure you'll appreciate that kind of thing can quickly lead to distraction. So with that said, anyway, what we're here to talk about, or I'm here to talk about today, is the first person on this show. I'm like the first band at the festival. I've got 3 songs, so I need to get on with it. So this is the Zvezda 72nd scale Hercules that was released, well, just coming up 2 weeks ago now. There's been quite a few builds about. I know Jennifer's building one, because I was talking to Jennifer for a couple of hours yesterday, and I've also been building one. So today, really, it's just a quick. It's going to be an overview of the kit, where I am, where I've got to, and where I plan to go from here. So just so you know, I've been building it since more or less last weekend, and this is where I am at the moment. So as you can see, the fuselages together, most of the main components are together, and just so you, also the wing. Okay, there seems to be some focusing issues. I might have lied about having no technical issues. So, but yeah, there's the wing. Is also done. So So yeah, overall, the kit builds very, very nicely. There's very, very few issues I've had with the kit. I would suggest the main issue I've had is, as you generally tend to find with larger models, especially transports that have got a large seam on the underside here, it's easy to get that a little bit flattened off, or even get a dip in it if you haven't got a central insert to go in there. This is better than most, I have to say. It's not actually that bad at all, but it did need a couple of applications of some super glue along the seam line. So I'm just going to take out a sanding stick. As you can see, I've added some paint along here, primed it last night just to see where we are with that. So I'll take this and we'll just go over here, and hopefully when the paint's been removed, you can see that is actually really, really flat now. It's flat. I've rescribed across the middle there. I've filled all these where the sponsons fit forward and back on the underside. There's also a couple of little gaps that need dealing with, but overall it was no more than a half an hour's work or so on that fuselage seam. It's a big model. You just clearly have to put time aside for those sorts of things. Tail planes are added. There's maybe a little bit, there's a couple of sinkage marks around these areas of the tailplane, but you're going to have to sand all this in to remove the seam and then rescribe anyway. So just in the same way, it's not a terribly large amount of work to deal with these. So yeah, it's basically just they've been working over this seam, over the fuselage, a couple of little inserts that go in here, which you can see there I've filled, or not filled, I've sanded those through and primed them. John?
Yeah, sorry, got technical problems here. Do apologise. Carry on.
Okay, so these have been added and sanded through. All the doors have been added. This one is going to be all buttoned up. So I've done a minimal job on the interior, enough there that if anybody looks through these tiny little windows, it will be fine. So what we're doing is working over the fuselage seam. Now, when you're working over the fuselage seam, there's some panel detail that goes across the fuselage seam, which you will have to rescribe after sanding. And what I've been using recently for this, for my sanding, or my scribing guide, I should say, is Tamiya's flexible white tape. It's thick enough that if you don't press too hard into it, it will allow you to scribe a line with the tool of your choice. So I'm just going to pick an end up here. So yeah, it's just about thick enough to act as a guide for your scribing tool, as long as you're gentle. Now, one thing you need to take into account if you're rescribing is the thickness of your scribing tool's blade, because you need the tip of the blade, this tip here, that needs to actually settle into the groove that you're scribing against. And if you put the tape or your guide right up into the groove, it's going to push it over to one side of the groove, if you like. So you need to be adjusting this, your guide, so that the tip of the blade actually falls into the groove. And then what I tend to do is, if hopefully you can see me there, I'm not even putting any pressure on that. That is literally the blade's own weight. And that's all I'm doing, a couple of passes like that. That's it. Do not go any further than that. The biggest problem or the biggest issue I see people making with scribing tools is putting too much pressure on when they're trying to scribe a line. And that is just asking for your tool to wander and dig in and all this sort of stuff. I'll show you again. This is a panel line I sort of rescribed yesterday, but even doing that under its own weight, like so, no pressure at all, it's still taking a very fine little filament of plastic out of there. So yeah, the biggest problem I always find when rescribing stuff like this is people put too much pressure on. Do not use any pressure at all. Let this do its own work, because it will take a huge cut, a huge gouge out of your model if you allow it. Because people often say that these are far too coarse to do any scribing with. They're not. They're really not, because the blade comes to a sharp point. So, like most things, it's down to the user, not the tool. If you do a couple of passes under its own weight, like so, firstly, there's less chance of it wandering, and secondly, you get a much finer line. People tend to go like that, I find, and they're putting pressure on it and pulling, whereas, again, just to show you, that's enough. Honestly, that's enough. And that's that line rescribed. So yeah, that's just a little tip on rescribing, which says, you know, you can use this, you can use Dymo tape, which I use quite often, I have to say, but I've really started mainly using the vinyl tapes for this sort of thing. So yeah, I appreciate that's a diversion from this actual model, but it covers stuff in that I had to do this to this model because of the, you know, removing seam lines and stuff, because they're big visible seam lines, obviously, across the top fuselage. And then when you sand away, like so, in fact, let me get a piece of fine wet dry paper, which I've had around for days and now appear to have lost. Let's use a fine sanding. But once you've primed and sanded, it will become very, very quickly obvious if you need to do any further work. And that line there, this seam, is at this point pretty much perfect. I'm happy with that. The other thing you need to do is check for scratches, because coarser sanding implements are going to leave scratches, and priming helps to really, really throw a scratch into sharp relief. So you just need to sand until all the scratches are gone. So hopefully you can see that. So that's the fuselage done. So in terms of rescribing, there's also some, you're also going to lose other bits of detail. Like here, there's a hatch where the Astrodome goes on the real aircraft. You can very easily lose that while you're sanding this this seam over, and it's in a very visible area, so you want to rescribe it. Quite difficult to rescribe circles, so what I've done is I went onto my cutter this morning, and using some vinyl cutting material, some vinyl adhesive material, I cut out a circle the same size as the Astrodome. This is one where I've sort of weeded out the carrier film, if you like, so you can see. And again, this relies on you being very, very gentle with your scribing tool. But if I just drop that into place where it needs to go, like so, and then pick up a scribing implement. Now, this scribing implement I'm using is a carbide drill that has previously snapped, but it leaves a very, very sharp edge on it. And again, just dropping it in and almost letting its own weight. It's better to do 10 passes under its own weight and try and do this in one heavy pass, because you will, first off, you'll disturb the vinyl, you'll get it gouging and jumping and all this sort of thing. So it's far easier or far better and safer to do it like this, which is under its own power, more or less, under its own weight. And it should be stressed here, I'm not correcting any fault of the kit. This is just normal modelling practice that will happen with any kit. So you can take that off then. I will sand that through to flatten it off. Remove any edges. When you're using a point, like a sewing needle or something like that, it's not actually going to cut material. It's going to raise a divot. It's going to sort of press into the material rather than cut it. So you have to be careful with the cleanup of those areas especially. So all I'm going to do is just put a tiny drop of glue in there. And that's that Astrodome hatch rescribed. So what other things can you do with a vinyl cutter? Well, you've got a lot of windows along a Hercules. No, not a lot, not as many aircraft, but there are still some, and they're circular, which will be a real bind to try and mask. Traditionally, some people would try and use a drop of some kind of masking material, masking fluid like this, which can work, but it tends to flake paint as you pull it up and all that sort of stuff. So again, we go back to the silhouette cutter that I have, and this morning I made this set of masks here, and here's a set that I weeded out, where I just cut circles the same size as the portholes in the fuselage. And then, honestly, it is the work of seconds. Pick one up with the tweezers. That's that porthole masked. So I can work across this model in literally seconds. Something where traditionally you'd have been trying all sorts of masking techniques to do this kind of thing. With the benefit of a silhouette or cricut, whatever, you can make your own masks for these sorts of things. Drop them in place, and that's how quickly that can go. They're all masked now, so they will stay on until painting's completed. I will be making some for the canopy, the clear areas, which I've yet to add. But since I got a silhouette cutter, it's kind of, I use it on every model. Excuse me, I will use my silhouette cutter on every model somewhere to help speed up the production process, if you like, the building process. The other thing I've used on this model is the wheels. So these wheels were, I measured the size of the hubs, I painted the wheels dark grey, Then I masked the hubs off using, again, some circles cut with the Silhouette cutter. Added some liquid mask to cover up all the areas where the vinyl didn't cover. And then it was a quick blast of white to do them. And I think it just gives you a far sharper hub and wheel than hand painting ever does. I try and do this all the time. I would rather spend sort of 15 minutes with the software and my Silhouette cutter making a mask to do that than sit down for half an hour and try to paint them all with a paintbrush. So, I mean, really, I'm just telling you what a wonderful kit this is. There are one or two very minor issues that you're going to find with any kit. But the wing there built, and as previously discussed, the fact that you've got full forms of the aerofoil section between the top and the bottom gives it a really, really rigid assembly. There's a small panel, there's a small line here where the outer wing panels attach, but really careful gluing was resulted in that pretty much looking just like a panel line on the rest of the model. Engine nacelles here. You will have to do quite a lot of rescribing on these because whichever way you do these engine nacelles, there's all the seams need to be cleaned up. The fronts are separate, and you are inevitably going to lose some detail. But it's mostly straight lines, so not a huge issue. The fit of the nacelles to the wings is just beautiful, especially on the top here where you've got these fairings. It was literally 15-20 seconds on each one, sanding over. A couple of tiny drops of super glue to fill some really, really minor gaps here. But the main thing was there was no steps. Quite a lot of times people will try and push two parts together to make sure there's no gap, and that pushes out of alignment and creates a step. If you have a choice between something being out of alignment or having a gap, always choose the gap. Always align it properly so that it's level. It's much, much easier and quicker to fill a level gap than it is to try and remove a step. If this had a step, I'd be removing all of this sort of minor detail here. Let's bring you in a little bit again. So if I was doing, if I joined these and tried to get rid of that little gap there and then got it out of alignment and had a step, I would have potentially damaged all this little detail, all these little detail parts here. So always pick a gap over a step if your model sort of gives you the option to do so. I'm just waiting for this to focus. There we go. Yeah, always pick a gap over a step because it's very, very easy to fill a level gap. It's very, very difficult to get rid of a step. So that's just the way it is.
Now would be a good time to come in and ask some questions. Actually, we have some questions here. If you don't mind answering them, Drew.
Go for it. Go for it.
Steph, here's a good one. Steph says, surely Maskol Copydex or masking tape is a bit better. £250 is a lot to dole out for one of those.
Clearly, I'm going to disagree with that because I doled out 250 quid on one of these. No, I think Copydex or Maskol, as I said, the problem with any of these masking materials, and I've started using these an awful lot to fill stuff in that I mask these days. But the problem with these is they create a very, very rounded edge on that you're spraying up against. And when you pull the mask off, it just inevitably pulls flakes of paint away with it where you know from outside of the masked area. So no, I mean, you could argue that I know I believe Jennifer has some punches that will deal with this. deal with things like these windows. But since having a silhouette cutter, initially I bought it for doing difficult designs and things like that. What it's actually become really, really useful for is really simple stuff like circles, and repeatedly cutting very fine strips for either plastic sheet for detailing or masking tape for, if you want to do walkway lines, for instance, and they have to be 0.5 millimeter thick. You can do that with a rule, but it never seems to be quite as exact as you'd like. With this, it takes me 2 seconds to design a 0.5 millimeter wide stripe and then cut it. And I can do that as many times as I want. I think that, as I've said repeatedly on various forums and web Facebook groups and stuff, getting the silhouette cutter has been the biggest revolution in my modeling since getting an airbrush. And I genuinely mean that. I use it on every single build for my own canopy masks, for wheel hubs. You're never going to get a wheel hub as sharp as by hand painting as you can by spraying it, because a mask creates a hard edge.
Yeah, I think the thing I'd add to that is that in a given year you could spend 250 quid on kits that you're not going to build. Or you could spend 250 quid on a piece of equipment that chances are you're actually going to be using it. Can you lock off the focus on your camera, Drew?
I can. I'm trying to find out how to do it, and it won't.
Okay, no problem. Yeah, you can spend 250 quid in a given year on kits that are just going to accumulate dust that you're not going to build, or you can spend 250 quid, buy a bit of kit that you actually are pretty much you're going to be using almost every time you're sat in the work, sat doing something.
Absolutely.
And I've got one because I need it in the day job anyway for designing shapes for decals and refining the shapes for decals. But using it in the hobby side, oh boy, I've got, if ever I need to build 109s, I've got pre-cut masks for all the splinter camouflage all done, or I can just go in and tweak them. And it's, I'm a canopy mask. I can make my own canopy masks, wheel masks, complicated trim, whereby if I look at a decal and think I don't fancy that, I can scan it, redraw it, put it through the silhouette cutter, and then I've got a ready-made mask shape for a bit of trim. So it's one of those things. I mean, we talk about the things like the Despy cutters. Yeah, okay, they're 35 quid for a pair of cutters. You can use a scalpel, but Exactly. Right, another question here. Andy Goodman asks, what's the vinyl material, Drew?
The vinyl material, this vinyl material here that I'm using is called Oromask 810.
Right.
You probably it's a trade name, but it's a thin sort of translucent vinyl material. It's quite flexible, but hopefully you can see with that off there, it's translucent. And I tend to use that, or I use Tamiya Do masking sheets, which are good for some other canopy stuff that has to be a bit more flexible. Quite often I use kip tape these days. I tape it to a piece of plastic and put that through the cutter to make canopy masks and stuff like that. So I would, in making walkways for this, I intend to pull a strip of this out, place it on the mask, place it on the backing sheet, and cut sort of 0.5 millimeter wide strips with it to do the canopy, to do the walkways, because it's basically the same stuff as Tamiya tape and Tamiya masking sheet. It's just cheaper. So yeah, there's a variety of different. There's Ultramask, which you can get from the airbrushes.co.uk in this country. You're looking around for vinyl masks, but the one that most of us have settled on after sort of backwards and forwards on various forums and stuff is Oromask 810.
I'll tell you what, Drew, when you finish your broadcast this morning, as you've got admin privileges to the page, if you can find links for these things and post them up, I think that would be very useful for people, if you don't mind.
I will say with the Oromask 810, it's difficult to find a shop that you can buy it from. I've had real difficulty. I tend to get that from eBay. I'll find
just an eBay link would be fine.
But as with most of this stuff these days, I just I do an eBay search first off, and quite often I take no notice of where it's coming from.
Right.
You know,
Well,
so stuff turns up from Germany, and I didn't even realise the company was in Germany because I've just gone, oh, that's the cheapest, hit it, and a week later it turns up and it's all in Germany. You go, oh, it came from Germany. Yeah, I mean, I'll find some links and stuff like that.
Brilliant.
Put them on the website.
Quick question from Bryn here. He says, "Can the video be watched later? Got chores to do." Yes, it can, Bryn. What we'll probably do actually is when the stream's finished, we'll probably download them and we'll actually chop them up into shorter chunks rather than trying to upload continuous kind of like 4-hour chunks. So what I'll probably do is get the download, then edit it, just put a break in at roughly every hour mark, as on the schedule, so that we can upload it as shorter chunks. So yes, it will be there anyway, but then I'll edit it and then I'll put it up. I think
that'll be a greatest hits movie reel.
No, it will be the link. It'll be the continuous stream, but it'll just be chopped up into shorter chunks so that people don't have to kind of wade through a 4-hour thing to find something. We have got one here from Smaz Videos. He says, Mustafa here. Speaking of cutting canopy masks, how do you measure to get the exact dimensions?
To be blunt, Mustafa, it's not a quick process. It is an involved. It can be laborious. Quite often, you'll find that simple designs are quite easy. A circle can be measured and cut. A square can be measured and designed. But for stuff that's more difficult, it's guesswork, test, and test fit something, adjust the drawing file, recut it, and you'll find what you find is that as you do more of this, you can dial stuff in really quite quickly. You start getting an eye for what needs to be done. Yeah. But no, this is one of those things where there are no shortcuts, but the benefits come in that once you've created a mask, if you're like me and you tend to build multiples of any given model, like the Special Hobby Mirage F1, I've built about 5 of them so far. You then have that mask on file.
Mm-hmm.
So you just it's the work of 2 minutes to print it. So initially laborious,
trial and error.
But yeah, people tend to look for a quick solution very often, and sadly, if you're designing your own canopy masks, there isn't one. No. It can be quite laborious, but as with any skill, the more you do it, the better of an eye you develop for it.
That's okay. Now, got Steph asks, morning folks, when's the new Italeri Tonka on? The Italeri Tonka is on at 12:45 or starting around 12:45. And one last question for the moment, and I've just got to try and find where it's gone. Here it is from Simon Lewis. And he says, could you show us the vinyl circle cutter in action? Probably not today, but I actually think for a future video, I think that'd be a good one.
It's not a bad idea to actually do something showing how the silhouette cutter and stuff like that works. I'd say it's difficult because I'll have to go into another room and set it all up at the moment, and it's just it's not something that can be done on an ad hoc basis.
It's not something we can do live, but I think certainly is something that perhaps if over the next month or so, Drew goes and shoots some video and we edit it together and put it on this page, then I think that's a very good idea. I think that's a brilliant suggestion.
Yeah, so screen grab showing the design process and then all the way through to the actual cutting. So yeah, it's a good one for an actual video, I think.
Yeah. All right, folks, keep the questions coming in. I am going to remove myself in every sense of the phrase and let Drew carry on. And I'll probably pop back in about another 20 minutes for more of your questions. So, Drew, back.
Thank you very much. So, yeah, here we are. So that's the wing. And I'll just to show you how this works. There's our wing. And this is just a measure of the kit. That's the wing in place. As you can see, with a tiny bit of pressure, that wing is basically a perfect fit in there. Will it need sanding? Well, it's a join on top of a model. Of course, it's going to need some sanding, but that is about as good a fit as you could expect to get. Even on the underside here, look, there's no wing root gap. So that is literally going to be dropped in place, a bead of cement run around it, and then we'll look at whatever sanding needs to be done afterwards. I suspect there won't be a terrible amount. In fact, Jen and I were discussing this yesterday as we modelled at each other. There's always a potential for this to actually spray the fuselage and the wing separately and then bring it together, and you're going to have a very, very minor sort of touch-up job around this area when you've dealt with it. So I think Jen is planning to actually do that. I'm taking it under advisement, and I'll see how I feel when I get there. Quite often I tend to get carried away on myself and go, oh, the hell with it, and glue it on, because I like zooming my models around the room. Who doesn't? So like I said, I'm doing my model all buttoned up, so there's going to be nothing really visible. So one of the things I did yesterday was I decided to check out the fit of the rear ramp parts. Now, if any of you have built large transport models with rear ramps, you'll know, generally speaking, the fit tends to be pretty ropey on that sort of thing. However, I do these days have faith in Zvezda. So I'm not going to lie and say this is my first check fit, because I did do a little bit of check fitting yesterday. But on the rear part of the ramp, there's a ledge around most of it here, which hopefully you can see, and there's a recess in here. So it's quite fiddly because I'm trying to angle this for the camera, but I have test fitted it yesterday, and there we go. That is how well that rear ramp fits. As Jennifer said, actually it fits better than the real thing. So with that in place, all I'm going to do is make sure it's all lined up where we want it, like so. And then I'm just going to run a bead of this is Tamiya's quick setting extra thin. And like I say, if any of you have built large transport aircraft before, take for instance the Airfix Hercules or the Italeri Hercules, just use other Hercules, you'll know, generally speaking, what an absolute nightmare getting rear ramps and stuff to fit, which is, I think, arguably why they're so often done open. Is because people wanted to do them closed, but there was just absolutely no reasonable way to do it without a massive filling. And here's the other part of the ramp, and again, it just drops in onto ledges. Like so. And a really remarkable fit. So I'm actually going to glue that in place now and call this model buttoned up. So yes, folks, it wasn't just here to talk. I was going to do some actual modelling, however limited. And this is why I'm, for the most part, I'm such a fan of Zvezda kits these days, because their engineering really is second to none these days. For the last decade or so, their engineering and fit has been as good as anybody else in the business. Absolutely superb. I do. There's a few things I wish the Vesta would sort going forward. I would like their surface detail to be a little bit more consistent. It can fade in and out in some places, be a bit heavy in some, a bit light in others. I'd like them to work on making that sort of detail a bit more consistent going forward. And I would really like them to work on their clear parts, because their clear parts are usually very nicely molded, but they're molded in a sort of clear rubbery sort of plastic, which doesn't sound very well at all. So as with all of these, but then we could talk about any given manufacturer on the scene at the moment and say, yeah, there are traits of any manufacturer that I would like to see addressed in some way. But I have to say, in all my years of modelling, which is over 40 years now, you know, I'm really that old, I have never experienced a ramp or a large access door on a kit which fits as well as that does. It's really remarkable. So this is basically all coming together now, and we're left with things like the tanks here, which I have previously assembled, sanded, restriped the detail. Now I just have to drop in things like the chaff dispensers on the rear here. I assembled all of the props, or the spinners, I should say. So I seem to have lost one of these spinners, so I'm going to have to tear this room apart this afternoon and try and find it. But yeah, this is where we are at the moment. Just going to sand away. But I guess today was as much about the processes I'm using on this model as anything. And you can see with that sanded, that is perfectly smooth there. Perfectly smooth. So I think this kit is retailing for around the £40 mark, which is really quite stunning value for money, considering how much is in the kit. You get parts more or less to do any C130H, and probably for the most part E variant from this model. You've got all the different sponson parts and stuff like that. There's different inserts here, which again is one of those things that nobody was that keen on, but we understand why they did it. So there's different inserts for the Royal Air Force variant and other variants. There's different intakes setups here. I'm really gonna have to sort my camera out. I do apologise for the lack of the lack of focusing consistency, if you like. So what we'll do is I have sanded over the nacelles here previously. So let's give the nacelles a little bit of a spray. I'm just putting a piece of card here that will be sprayed on. And again, something we were discussing just last night was having an airbrush here as a tool. There's no major setup here. This airbrush has been here. It's just always plugged in at my side. Just make sure the needle's free because it had paint in it. That wasn't planned. So any old dark grey will do. I'm using XF77 here because it's really quite close to the finished colour. I'll put a drop of Mr. Colour Thinner in with it, and I don't know about anybody else, but I could always do with the. I feel that a lot of this weekend is hopefully about demystifying things. People tend to think that, for instance, airbrushes are a hugely complicated thing to deal with, and we're trying to make the argument that it's just another tool. So look, I'm using an old brush here to stir the paint, like so. Let's put a bit of Mr. Colour Thinner in there. Like so. So we'll check our airflow, like so. We know that's coming through okay. So then we're just going to go over all the seams. Because that's immediately going to tell you if you need to do any more work on these seams. And like I say, I've picked a colour that is close to the final grey. Because later on, it'll just make it easier when I come to spray the overall colour. So I'll do a little bit more around detail here, but yeah, applying a check coat is never a bad thing to do. It just gives you extra security that what you're doing has worked. So as that's drying, hopefully you can see where I've rescribed the detail in there. Like I say, people, it's about demystifying the hobby. So I've emptied the paint out of the brush. I'm just going to put a bit of gun cleaner in there, which is basically recycled lacquer thinner. You wouldn't use it for thinning paint, but for cleaning brushes and stuff, it's fine. So just put a bit in, give it a stir around. And if you spray it through, like so, give your brush a clean, retract the needle, wipe your needle off, pop the needle back in, and that's it. This is why a lot of us use an airbrush just as a tool. It just sits there and it's ready to be picked up, used, cleaned out and put back out anytime you want. A lot of people who don't have airbrushes or are new to it think it's a massively involved process. You know, you have to strip it down and clean it every time. You've seen how long that took me to get it in action, spray, empty it out and clean it. It was a work of minutes. Now that goes off to the side there and it will sit there until the next time I need to pick it up. But in the meantime, my model desk is already becoming a disaster area less than an hour after I started this live feed. So I do apologise for that. It's a kind of disease of modelers, isn't it? That areas rapidly become clogged with stuff. But there's that. These prime parts, and now you can look and catch it with the light and see if anything needs doing. And particularly good because as you sand away the paint, it will leave a very, very clear witness if any further work needs doing. So as I sand down this, hopefully, or as I polish this paint away more or less, if I get to the stage where none of this paint is visible except for in this panel line here, we know that join is good. Now sometimes on a modern kit, the fit is so good that you can get away without priming because you just know the fit is good. But anywhere where you've done had to deal with a seam or a join, I always think it's worth doing this for the few minutes of work that it requires. So I can see a couple of tiny little marks in here where the paint's remained when I polished it, but they're small enough that and that's it done. So not only does it highlight any issues, it actually highlights when the issue has been dealt with as well. So it can actually save you. This kind of priming can save you quite a lot of time. John, can you come in a second, please?
I certainly can.
John, sorry, the door's gone and I think it's a delivery. I'll be 30.
Okay, then that's fine. That's fine. Okay, that's these things always happen. Right, I'll give you a quick rundown of the schedule here at the moment. It's good job I was in the kitchen making a cup of tea, so I just got one here actually. So at 11:15, Drew's going through to 11:15. Then 11:15, 11:30, we'll play catch up here. Then 11:30 to 12:30, it's modelling demo with Ivan Jensen Taylor, who we had a chat with last night. Then through to 12:30 to 12:45, we're back in the HQ here. Then we will be bringing in Spencer Pollard to have a chat about the Italeri 30-second scale tornado, of which I'm just finishing uploading the images that Spencer has sent me here. And we'll also be putting them up on the web page as well, on the Facebook page rather. Then at 12:45 to 13:45, it's a modelling demo with Mr. Spencer Pollard. Then 13:45 to 14:30, 1:45 to 2:30, then intermission. We are actually off the air. There'll be dead air for 45 minutes for light refreshments. Then we're back on the air at 2:30 to 2:45, me yabbering away in here. Then 2:45 to 3:45, it's a modelling Geno with Dem Wright. It's a modelling demo with Jen Wright. And then quarter to 4 o'clock, it's me, fortunately, sorry about that. And then from 5 o'clock till 4 o'clock till 5 o'clock, it's a modelling demo with Mike Williams. Then, rather excitingly, 5 o'clock till 5:30, I'm actually going to be chatting to Chris Buchholz, the American modeler and author, which is going to be good. Then at 5:30 till 6 o'clock, I'll be chatting to Mr. Matt Whiting, one of the senior designers at Airfix. So if you want to get your questions in, pop them up on the Facebook page and we'll ask some of them for Matt. Unfortunately, the one question you won't be able to ask is, what are Airfix doing next? So, and then that'll be it. Then we'll be off air for another intermission for 2 hours. There'll be no broadcast, it'll be dead air. Then at 7:30 through to about 9 o'clock, it'll be another online social and kind of get together. So that's it. I'll leave Drew to his Hercules and we'll catch up probably in about 10-15 minutes for some more questions for Drew. So
yes, I do apologise for that. And now I've got there we go. I do apologise for that. Deliveries in the UK tend to be, if you don't get them immediately, they turn up. You will never see them again for weeks. So apologies for that. My camera is doing some really odd things that I really need to sort out. I do apologise, ladies and gentlemen. I think it's got facial recognition on or something. We've had numerous technical issues, all of us, in the last day or so, unfortunately. So it's been interesting, shall we say. So one of the other things, with this in place and setting, the paratroop doors in the sides here are also separate. But in addition to that, the deflectors, the parachute door deflectors, troop door deflectors are separate because they've given you two different versions in the kit, with and without the Rato rocket attachments. So you'll give me 2 seconds. This is live as it happens, people. I've got no idea how these are going to fit, but I am taking a bet. You know, I'm prepared to bet that they're just going to drop into place with no issues whatsoever. So as you can see, using the Dispy single edge cutters to snip away the sprue attachments. And that's all the cleanup you need when you've used these a good pair of single edge cutters, because it basically snips it completely flush. So let's have a look, shall we? Yeah, there you go. Let's see if I can bring you in a little bit. So there's our recess there. And there's a door in place, which is an absolutely perfect fit. Let's try the other door on the other side, just to see. I suspect the same thing will hold true. And it's... And this is why you test fit, because I'm just seeing a tiny bit of a step there, which probably that will be plenty to deal with. And it is plenty to deal with. So I don't want to push any glue out of the edges of this door when it goes into place. I want it to just drop into place and stay there. So what I'm going to use, rather than any of the thin cements initially, is I'm going to use Tamiya's white cement, which is a slightly thicker cement with a resin in it. And I'm going to drop a little bit across the center of that door, a little bit again. So once this door is dropped in place, that will spread out a little bit, but hopefully it won't come to the edges, which will result in a perfectly fitted door. No issues there whatsoever. That will not need any further work. I will really just ignore that now. So let's have a look at the other side. Again, different glues are good for different things. So let's just do that a second. Let's get this in place. So there we go, that door's in place. Now I might let that set for a while, and then I'll just run a quick bead of Tamiya's standard extra thin around, or maybe even the quick setting type. But in terms of tools, cements are sort of a subject all of their own. The majority of the time these days, I'm using Tamiya White Cap, Tamiya Extra Thin. Let's get all this in shot, shall we? There we go. So that's the three that I generally use for probably 95% of my modelling. The White Cap, like I say, is slightly thicker, has very slight gap filling capabilities. It's slower setting. The Tamiya Extra Thin is pretty much the one that everybody's been using for years now. I do like it, but I find myself it's probably the least used of the three. I find because if I need something where I need capillary action or its thinness, I'll use the quick setting because it's as thin as this, but it's kind of sets hard in very, very quickly indeed. So again, you need to adapt. You need to pick the right tool for the job, and all three cements have different qualities. Very slow setting, quite thick, reasonably quick setting, but not very quick, but can result in ghost seams very, very easily, especially if you're doing natural metal finishes. So be aware of that with this. It can outgas for quite a long time after you've glued. And this stuff, which is the one I tend to use for most of my everyday work these days. So again, glues. That said, I do have things like Mr. Hobby SP Black there. That, I believe, is telling me my hour is up. So I don't know if John wants to come in and hit me with any questions.
No, you are down for 11:15, so your alarm is a little bit early, but hey ho.
I thought I was on for an hour. Anyway, questions then.
Well, yeah, you have been, but you were 11:15. You were 10:15 to 11:15. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. We questions indeed. Questions.
Hit me with questions.
Alan Quelly asks, "Is that an Iwata HPCH you are using, Drew?"
Indeed, it is, Alan. Indeed, it is. Well, I think let's come out a little bit. Yeah, it's my workhorse airbrush that let's put it the right way up. Again, because of the way I'm set up here, my camera is upside down, so I need to put everything upside down so it appears the right way to you guys, because it's mounted above my model desk, oddly. But yes, Alan, it is an Iwata HPCH. I have been promising myself a custom Micron for quite some time, but honestly, the HPCH does nearly everything I need it to. So that is my workhorse, along with the Badger here. The Renegade Chrome is my secondary airbrush, and I've got about another 5 off to one side in a drawer here. I tend to collect airbrushes, which I think we all do, don't we, John? I think you've got a fair few as well. We just accumulate airbrushes. But yeah, over the years, I've come back to these being my two workhorses. That's got quite a big nozzle in it. That's the Badger Renegade Chrome. I think that's got a 0.6 nozzle in it, so it's good for large applications. And this is my everything else airbrush, really. So.
It's quite weird because I've got here's one I prepared earlier. I also have a Badger Renegade Chrome, and I actually find it's the best airbrush for doing fine line detailing. But horses for courses.
As we discussed before, it's the geometry of the nozzle, not the width of the nozzle that matters.
Yeah. Yeah.
So you can have a 0.6 nozzle, but if the geometry of the nozzle's fine, you're going to get ultra fine lines with it.
Absolutely. Got another question here from Simon Lewis. He says, "Hi, what primer do you use over the seam lines?"
Well, in this instance, it was just XF77, which is one of the IJN Grey from the Sabero arsenal. It's just any kind of neutralish grey or black will work. Silver is phenomenal because silver will throw any problem into sharp relief for you to deal with. But when you're dealing with something like this that is ultimately going to be in a matte finish, Although you shouldn't really say it, you can get away with a bit more. You can get away with perhaps not quite the finish that you'd need for a natural metal finish. But yeah, it's basically the reason I use this is because, as you saw, I applied it, cleaned the airbrush, and then started sanding it. In small areas, it can be, it dries enough to be sanded to check the seams in a minute, 90 seconds. So it doesn't really matter for seam checking. Use anything, and I will spray any lacquer or Mr. Primer over that if I want to me a primer, anything.
Well, you say for checking seams, use anything. Simon also asked, I bought some Vallejo primer, and do you really have to strip the airbrush to clean it after using it? That is why I wondered.
Yeah, okay. I'll need to backpedal slightly there and say, honestly, sorry, I didn't catch the name of that gentleman.
That's Simon Lewis.
To be fair, Simon, and I like a lot of what Vallejo do, but their primers are awful.
They're not really primers; they're just undercoats.
They're undercoats, and they're latex based, and they peel and roll and do all this sort of stuff. If you're checking a seam line, honestly, use something like this. And if you want a primer that is going to do the job but is still a water-based primer, Stynylrez is the way to go, because that will feather and sand. I have all the Stynylreses here. I don't tend to use them very much these days because I tend to use either Mr. Surfacers or Tamiya surface primers.
Well, here's a top tip for everybody. I've actually I've Mr. Surfacer Black, which is one of my favourite things for checking seam lines and whatnot, and I decanted it into an old Tamiya cement jar, which also means that I then, he said if you can open the thing, then means I've also got an applicator brush ready to go every time. Don't have to clean out a brush, don't have to dedicate one to Mr. Colour primer, and I just brush that onto the seam lines, or even sometimes mix it with a little bit of super glue if I want something with a bit more body. Let it dry for 10, 15, 20 minutes, then just go over it, and you can see exactly where you are, what you're working with and where it's going. So I'm just seeing what other questions we've got here. Quick question let me just have a look. Where did it go? Andy King says he'd like to tune in, but he doesn't like the Facebook app. Well, the thing is, Andy, this will be going up on YouTube. It's actually live streaming to Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube at the moment. The Facebook and YouTube ones will leave the complete streams up because they will stay up. They stay up as catch-up items. But then what we'll do is we'll go in and we'll edit them down, just chop them up into kind of like hourly chunks, so they are individual segments. Then we'll upload those, and then we'll replace the single continuous recording. But if you want to watch it on another platform, you can watch it on YouTube. You can watch it on Catch Up on YouTube, certainly, or Twitter. So we've got it going across 3 platforms at the moment. Just having a quick look. Any more questions here? We've convinced Steph to go and buy a silhouette cutter. That's good. Excellent. Our shares in the silhouette company are complete now. Excellent.
It really is one of those things that you'll find incredibly useful for any number of jobs, because you can cut plastic sheet with it as well. So if you need a repeatable plastic detail, you can also cut that with it. So then there are some Facebook pages and forums around dealing with using these. So check those out as well.
I would say also, going back to what Simon Lewis asked about Vallejo primer, that is the one exception where if you're going to use it, that's the one paint where I think when you've finished, you really do have to kind of get in there and give the airbrush a good clean. With anything else like lacquer-based paints or alcohol-based paints, is usually all you got to do is just literally flush the airbrush, give the needle a wipe, and put a bit of thinner, put a bit of Mr. Cover thinner or Tamiya thinner in the cup, and that'll be good for the next time round. With the Vallejo paints, once they dry, if you get the smallest fragment dries in the airbrush, you are having to do a deep clean, unfortunately. So You do with the water-based or latex-based acrylics, you do have to be a little bit more stringent in cleaning the airbrush afterwards. So
yeah, I think I was immediately hoisted by my own petard there when I said use anything, and you immediately came back with the Vallejo primer, and I'm like, yeah, but not that.
You could brush it onto seams, and you could brush it onto seams. You could certainly use it in a manner, but it just won't sand. It won't feather. It
lulls you into
tear.
Purity, because it actually sprays beautifully and looks beautiful when it's dry. It's just as soon as you go to deal with any of the issues it throws up,
yeah,
you immediately start to find out that it's a really, really problematic product.
And I will say that Tamiya's, this is, I'm trying to think what the number is. This is 73608 US olive drab. In my opinion, this is one of the loveliest olive drab colors out there. It's got a beautiful kind of desaturated, but very kind of slightly, it kind of hovers between brown and green. Every time you look at it, you think, is that a brown? Is it a green? It's also quite, I'd say it's moderately light. So it's got a beautiful scale finish to it. And this is my go-to olive drab for most parts. This is usually the base color that I will use for anything that's painted in olive drab. But I use it as a base color. Don't use it as a primer. That's the difference.
Yes. Yes.
Right, Drew. There we go. Oh, the bell's not working. Any other business?
No, I will endeavour to. Apologies for the focusing issues today. Again, we've all had technical issues, and resetting my camera was one of those last night. And obviously, it's yet to dial it back in. But no, I think I'm looking forward to the rest of the day and seeing what people do. Thanks for having me on as sort of like the opening act.
The guinea pig. I mean, the opening act. Yes, absolutely. Yeah. The thing is, though, I know when we were talking about this, and we said, I wanted everybody to actually have 90-minute slots, but people were going, no, I think, I don't think I could fill a 90-minute slot. I'll just do an hour. I tell you what, that hour goes quickly, doesn't it?
It does, but if you find yourself, if I hadn't got as far along with this build as I have, I would have filled it without any trouble at all. As it was, I was doing some techniques work rather than focusing on the kit.
Yeah,
because it's kind of like I've shown you what I've done with this kit so far, and it's just unless I'm actually in a, I'd actually test fitted these yesterday. And I thought, no, I'm going to save actually gluing them until tomorrow, because then I'll have something to show just how good this kit is, how well this kit goes together. And as you can see, I don't think we've got too much argument with the fit of those, have we?
Well, I think people will be able to continue following your progress with this over on your Facebook page, which is Drew's model page rather. And obviously, if you can post the occasional kind of update pic onto the Interesting Modeling Co page, it's just all bases covered then. I think that's pretty much about it. We have actually hit the 11:15 mark, so we are. This is amazing. We're actually back on schedule again. So
cut me off.
Yeah. I will say thank you to Drew for that. That's an excellent start to the weekend, and we will see you again this evening for the social. And in the meantime, if you could sort out some links for that vinyl, or even just put up a link to the actual brand name and stuff like that, it just keeps people informed that way. So that would be brilliant. So
just if I might answer a very quick question from Rob Monfee. What drawing packages do you use with the cutter? I use Affinity Designer. It's basically a substitute for Adobe Illustrator that you don't have to pay every month for. There's any number of vector graphic, even the free ones like Inkscape and stuff like that. And
I'm still using Macromedia Freehand, which
if you're stuck in 2002, there's Freehand.
Absolutely. It's still 2002 Freehand is still better than 2020 Adobe Illustrator. Right. Controversy corner. And just one final question for Simon Lewis. He says, I bought the Vallejo primer. What could I use it for when I get some Preta primer? Honestly, Simon, use it as base colors. Use it as base colors.
If you're happy that your model needs no further work in terms of sanding and stuff, then you can use it. Don't ever use it to check a scene that might need more work.
No,
it's just, but really, I ended up throwing all mine in the bin, to be honest. I had most of the range and I just ended up binning them all. I know that's an expensive proposition for some people, and I get that they want to use it. So use it as base coats when you're happy that there's no more actual work is going to be need to be done. So
excellent. Right, Drew, I really do appreciate you being the first in the firing line this morning. So like I say, we will catch up with you later this evening.
Thank you. And I will see you on the social this evening.
See you later on. So excellent. Right. We are at 11:17 here on Saturday, the 7th of November. See, I can remember all this without looking at the calendar in the background. Coming up in a couple of minutes' time, we've got Ivan Taylor, who will be doing his demo. And I think he's doing some demos on oil brushes because he's pretty damn hot on the stuff. I'm not being idle in between shows here, incidentally, because I'm actually able to get on with my Italeri Semovente. So I'm sat here listening to the demos and everything and just kind of keeping an eye out for comments. But I'm actually getting on with some modeling as well, which is jolly good. And just as an update to the rest of the schedule, we've got Ivan coming up in a couple of minutes, actually. Then around about 12:30, 12:45, Mr. Spencer Pollard will be joining us to look at the brand new Italeri Tornado GR4 in 30-second scale. So that's going to be exciting. And then at 12:45 to 1:45, Spencer will be doing his own modeling demo. Then between 1:45, 2:30, we're going to have an intermission. We're off the air completely, but you can still catch up and watch everything else. Then we're back at 2:30, 2:45, bit of chat. Then round about 2:45 to 3:45, it's a modeling demo with Jen Wright. Then 3:45 to 4 o'clock, back here again. And then 4 o'clock to 5 o'clock, we are with Mr. Mike Williams, who will be doing a modeling demo. Then at 5 o'clock to 5:30, I hopefully will be having a chat with American modeler and author Christopher Buchholz. You may have seen some of his books. Fantastic things, books in general, but his books are fantastic. And I don't know where I was going with that. And then at 5:30 to 6 o'clock, I will be chatting to Mr. Matt Whiting, one of the senior designers at Airfix, who will be answering your questions, so long as they're not, what are Airfix going to do next? So without further ado, hello, Ivan. How are you?
Hello. I'm well. I'm tired. Went to bed very early last night, so I'm lacking sleep.
Right. Okay. Well, are you all ready to go?
I should be. I don't think I've forgotten anything.
Right. Okay. Well, in that case, then I'm going to hand over to you. And what I'll do is I'll pop back probably in about 20, 25 minutes and pick up on any comments and, ask questions. And then we'll probably do that again a bit more towards the end of the broadcast. So, Ivan, the show is all yours.
Smashing. Now the nerves are on. It's all on me to carry the show. So, hello everyone. I'm going to be doing a bit of a demonstration with oil brushes, the MIG Ammo oil brushes. Don't worry, it's not going to be my face the entire hour. I will be going over the desk in a minute. But before I get into doing any sort of demonstration with the oil brushes, I do want to talk about model prep. So we are just going to flip to the desk and I can talk about a couple of the examples I've got that I'm going to be doing the demos on, and what I've done to the models before we apply any oils to it. So I'm just going to do a quick flip here, getting all very advanced. Right, so switch the light on, might help, I might be able to see. Right, so we've got three models here. We've got the absolutely beautiful Tamiya P47 Razorback. There's not a single decal on this model, all painted, all done with a silhouette cutter. Funnily enough, we were just talking about them. So we have this model. This was painted entirely with MRPs, which they're not glossy, they're not matte. They're a nice satin finish with this pen. So this hasn't had any clear coat on this model at all. It's got a nice sheen, you can see. There has been some oil work already done on this, but we are going to come back to this a little bit later and do some more work on it. I've not actually touched this model in about 18 months. It has been a while since we've played with this, and it's a shame because actually looking at it now, it's a really nice model. But yes, this has a satiny sheen. There's been zero clear coats on this. It was primed in Mr. Surfacer 1200, mixed with Mr. Leveling Thinner, and then given just the the base coats of MRP. That is all. So this hasn't received any clear coat. Then we have these two pieces of armor down here. If I'm shaking, I apologize. Yes. So we have the Marder, Tamiya Marder. Really nice kit, superb kit actually. It goes together like a dream. This was very, very quickly painted 2 nights ago. It was primed again. This was 1500 surfacer with Mr. Leveling Thinner, and then it was given a base coat of Tamiya Dark Yellow, again thinned with a Mr. Leveling Thinner. I'm not going to lie, all my lacquers I thin with Mr. Leveling Thinner. I just love it. I've tried the Rapid Thinner. I find sometimes I get a slightly rougher surface finish. That is obviously going to be the case because it doesn't have time to level as slowly as Leveling Thinner does. But this was given a Tamiya and MLT base coat, the acrylic Tamiyas, ultra smooth, and I mean smooth. You'd think this had been polished, but it hasn't. It's silky. The camouflage was done with the AK Rio colors. Again, that was just thinned with MLT. Once the paint was fully dry, it was given I'd say about a 60-40, 60% thinner to clear coat. This is XF. No, it's not XF. It's X35 semi-gloss clear. This is my go-to satin coat now. I tend to be controversial. I don't gloss things anymore. I've just completely stopped glossing. Especially with armor, I find gloss absolutely pointless. At the risk of sounding controversial, for me, after it's been base coated, it gets a satin coat, and that is it. From then, it does not get a single clear coat after that, and that does help provide a nice variation. You do get a plethora in different finishes. You'll get matte finishes, then you'll get some shiny areas, you'll get some dull areas, and it really does help bring the model alive. So once it's had a semi-gloss clear coat, that's it. Doesn't go any further than that. Same with this. They've both had the same process, except this one was base coated with AK Real Colors lacquer Dunkelgelb, but you can see they're very, very similar in color. So that was nice. Last night at about 3 a.m. they received a dark brown pin wash that was cleaned up not very well. It was a pretty rush job to get it done for today, but apart from that, the models are ready. The pin wash is more than dry. The clear coat, because it's a lacquer, because of the thinner, it dries very quickly. The paint dries quick because, again, lacquers are awesome for that reason. You don't have to wait around for things to dry. So here are the demo pieces. And as you can see in front of me, I have quite a few oil brushes. This is only about, I'd say now, a third of the range, because they keep adding more and more colors to the range, which is awesome. It is fantastic to see a range expanding, especially these. These are really good. So what is an oil brusher? As a comparison, we have an Abteilung 502 tube of oil right here. These are really common. These are really like any other tube of oil paint you'll get. Quite thick in the tube. You know, they get quite gunky at the top. That can happen, bit of a pain. And sometimes you do get an oozing of oil, but not in this one, not in this case, luckily. So from a tube of oil, you'll do that. It's quite thick, as you can see. It's quite pasty. These are very good oils, but they are quite thick, and you can thin them to your desired consistency. But with an oil brusher, we'll take the dark brown. This is my most used color. An oil brusher, give it a mix, because they do separate in the tube a little bit. Now, this is like a mascara. Not that I would know. It's like a mascara brush tube. And you can see it's a bit messy because it has been used a lot. This is nearly run out because I use it that often. But you can see it's helpful. It's all in the tube. It's a bit pre-thinned. You get a very, very helpful and convenient brush. And you can see it's a lot thinner. It is a little bit pre-thinned. So in comparison to the tube oil, it's a little bit thinned. I'm not 100% sure on what actually is in this, but I'm sure there is a faster drying agent in these tubes, because I do find these dry not ultra quick. They're not going to be dry in hours, but in comparison to, say, a thinned tube oil, these dry extraordinarily fast. Like, I'm finding a day after I've done oil work on a model, I'm able to handle it. I can do other stuff with it. I'm not risking ruining any of the work that I've previously done with oils. So as you can see, there is a difference in consistency. Like, because that's thinner, obviously it's soaking into the cardboard a little bit easier. So that is the difference. We do have a nice array of colours. I'm not going to go through all of them. We've got a yellow, green, blue, tan. We've got some browns, reds, whites, greys, greens. And what we're going to do is we're actually just going to crack on and do a little bit of oil work on. We'll do the Marder first, just because I really like these top panels we have to play with. The reason I do oils, you can do them as an oil dot filter. These do help make the surface look, as I said, not fresh. It looks worn. It looks like it's been rained on. It looks like it's had a bit of dirt on it and grime and dust, and it helps take away that very intense, clean look of a model. We're not going to do an oil dot filter right now, but we will do one a little bit later on. So what I will do is I usually use just one of these aluminium palettes. I will start with the brown. I always start with my shadow coats first. So I use dark brown rather than black for shadows. I find black it doesn't look right. Dark brown, especially on dark yellow vehicles, it is just perfect. And same as on olive drab, dark brown is just perfect for shadows. Now, Night Shift, Martin Kovac, he's the reason I started doing my oil work like this. A technique called ambient occlusion, or forced contrast, or there's lots of different words for it. But for me, what I use it for is it gives, yes, it's a 3D model and it has curves, contours, and all sorts going on. But I like to make flat surfaces look slightly more dimensional. So as you can see on the top, we have multiple panels, but that's all flat. What if I wanted to make these panels look like they're slightly raised and not overlapping, but slightly raised from each other? They're not perfect, but slightly raised or not. It just gives a bit more dimension. So I'm going to get some brown oil. Now, because we are reaching the bottom, there's not a lot, but a little goes a long way when it comes to oil. And one other thing I want to mention is synthetic brushes. Like here, I have quite a few synthetic brushes. Please don't use your expensive Winsor Newton Kolinsky Sable hair brushes, because with these, obviously, you have to clean them out with a white spirit or an odorless thinner. That's why synthetic brushes are better. They can withstand the aggressive thinners. You start doing that with your expensive brushes, they become brittle, they break. Believe me, I've done it. And it's not worth the expense. So we're going to take a pretty small brush. This is a 5-0, but it's only a small brush, very small tip. So we're going to start on this front panel. We're going to try and make this front panel, although, yes, there's a nice panel line and it's had a panel wash, we're going to try and just differentiate it from the rest of this front armor plate. So we take a little bit of oil. We're not taking a lot. It's very important that we don't have tons of oil on the brush. So it's only a little bit. We're just going to try, if I can stop my hand shaking, try and draw a neat-ish line just around the edge. So you can see I've done just a small, where's my camera? A small line just there. We're going to do that around the entire panel. Now, there will be some silence. I do apologise. I'm trying to keep this neat. The neater you are with oils, then there's a lot less messing around with cleanup. One thing I will say is that I blend all my oils dry. I don't like to get thinners involved. As you can see, we're not putting a lot of oil on. There's hardly any oil going on at the minute. And just to emphasize again, the order I do this, I'll do my base coat, and then camo, whatever, filters, clear coat, which will be the satin, then a pin wash, then oils, and then chipping, and so on. So we're going to take a separate brush. This is a slightly rounder, thicker, soft brush again, different than the one we used for the oil. This brush will now only be used for the dark brown. Don't want to be contaminating other oils with this. And just like this brush will only be used to blend the brown paint. So I like to blend it once the shine has gone from the oil. It's not dry, but it becomes blendable easier and it will stick. I find that if it's still a bit shiny, it doesn't blend, it just smudges around, and there is a difference. So the shine is gone, so we're just slightly going to feather the edge out. It does start quite messy, but as you start to blend, it does neaten itself out. So apologies, there will be some quiet moments for now. But like I say, no thinner. I always find if I don't use thinner, I have ultimate control. And then should I find a very, very stubborn area where the oil doesn't want to shift, I will actually come in with, say, a cotton bud, a Q-tip, as they would say in America. Right, so it has been blended out a little bit. As you can see, it still looks dark and a bit blotchy. So then we take an even bigger, softer brush, and then I blend out. I blend away from the line. I don't blend inwards because then you're not creating that nice edge. I use this to deliberately cause the edge of this panel. So just gently. We're not scrubbing. We're not being really aggressive and grinding the oil in. We're just gently feathering it. These are nice soft brushes. So we're just gently feathering the oil away from the edge of the line we've drawn. So we're just feathering it out. And this isn't so much as creating a shadow, but it's adding contrast to this panel. And it is very important you just get a smooth blend. And later we are going to just accentuate again that panel. We're going to make more contrast because it is a style I really like. See, a bit stubborn in this area, so just being a bit tougher with a smaller brush. Yeah, when it comes to modeling styles, high contrast. A Spanish school of modeling. That's my go-to favorite style. High contrast, not realistic, might not look realistic, but my word, it looks very interesting. Instantly catches my eye. So just making sure, smooth blend. And as you can see, we do have, there is a big difference now how obvious that panel is. It really does stand out. So if you imagine that across the model, it really does make little areas stand out. So I'm just going to blend it a little bit more. Just till I'm happy with it and we can move on. And you can see just how much oil is left on the model. There's not a lot. So you can imagine how quickly this is going to dry. It doesn't mean you want to be sticking your finger in it because you are going to leave a thumbprint of some sort. But just make sure you've blended it nice and smooth. And you can see already just here how much the panel stands out. I want to say that's the transmission access panel. But it really does make a difference. And I find it looks quite Cool. So we're going to do a little bit more just around these panels. Then we're going to come in with a lighter oil and again, really add a bit more contrast around the panel. So again, these 3 brushes now, they are for browns only. So keep that one over there. We're going to get another smaller brush. And yeah, sorry, we're going to do a little bit more brown first before we moved on to a lighter color. And then I can show you the oil dot filter on, say, the side of this just here. Now, the good thing is I can decide how I want panels to be. See, with this front panel, I decided that I wanted it to protrude slightly from the surface. If I wanted it to look a little bit more recessed, I would have done the same technique, but on the inside of the panel and blended inwards. That would have made the panel look recessed in the surface rather than protruding from the surface. So we're here, as you can see, we've got this driver's hatch. It stands out because it's got a pin wash, but maybe we want to make it look a lot more obvious. So we're going to take some more brown oil once again, and we are just going to draw it completely around the edge of the panel. Just one thing I always want to mention is I never, ever put oils on a gloss. I've made that mistake once, and I won't be doing it again. It doesn't do anything bad. Your oils just don't stick, and they'll just slide around and smudge constantly. Yes, we've used that brush. So I'd say at most you want a satin semi-gloss finish. Otherwise, things just aren't going to stick. And if it gets to a point you say you have too much oil on your model, which I think I might just have near this hinge, you can see it's quite dark. You can come in, say, this is one of those cute little Tamiya cotton buds, and just remove some. But like I said, I do try and avoid putting thinner on my model. And I don't like to blend using thinners because then I find the area doesn't dry quickly and the brush won't dry. So if I blend with thinner on a brush, that's it. That brush is condemned for a good few weeks because I can't ever get it dry. Doesn't matter how much you think you've dried it on a paper towel, it's not dry, especially when it comes to enamel thinners. So blending, always blending. That's what I love about oils. You have ultimate control. You can just blend and they don't dry super fast, so you can come back in later and blend some more. That's a little bit too big, that brush. I need something with a little bit more aggression. Take this one, it's a bit stiffer, this one. See, I keep saying this, I say it jokingly, but I also kind of mean it. My models always look very, very boring until oils get on them. Because I find that my models tend to be quite flat and a bit boring. Apologies for that. So oils really, they make everything pop. They make things stand out. That's what I like about them. But oils aren't limited to just this technique. Oils have an abundance of different techniques. Put that back down. So if we go back once again, and I can see my own camera, you can see that commander's hatch, how much that stands out now. It's provided a bit of a shadow to the surrounding area. So if you like I say again, if you imagine that on all the areas you want to pick out and stand out, that really does add an awful lot of dimension to the model. Gonna do
Ivan,
Hello.
sorry, cut in for a second here.
Absolutely.
Just to say, obviously, people, if you've got some questions for Ivan, do ping them up on the feed here, and I can ask Ivan on your behalf, and he can answer some questions. I've been watching this avidly because I've got, admittedly, my collection of oil brushes is slightly smaller, but I'm sold on them. There, as you were saying at the beginning, there's something different about their chemistry to oil paints, and I think I've said this before. I think they're slightly waxier, which means that you can kind of go in there and blend them and kind of feather them, which sometimes you can't quite do that with oils. Oils like to stay oily, but these are kind of waxy. It's a weird kind of difference, but they do. I mean, my two favorites are Dust and Starship Filth.
I was going to mention that. I have heard amazing things about Starship Filth, yet I've never used it.
Really?
I hear everyone talk about it, and I've never used the colour. I've just not really ever had the need to. I've never found a place where I thought that might be appropriate, but everyone says it's a fantastic colour.
It is my go-to. It's my go-to for olive drabs and German dark yellow. It just seems to work beautifully on both because it adds shadow and depth, but it's not overpowering, and it's kind of neutral as well. Like I say, I will mix it with the Dust as well to get a variety of colours. But like you, I decant it into just like a little artist mixing wheel, and then I will use I will apply it with my, shall we say, my less than pristine brushes. And when it comes to blending, I will use, well, I won't keep you too long because this is your show, but I got this pack of nail makeup brushes from Poundland. And there are some brushes in here which are perfect for blending because you will knacker the brushes eventually. But yeah, I just use kind of like old ones and whatever. And as you said, don't use your Kolinsky sables. In fact, it's going to sound extravagant here now, but I've got various kind of jars of mugs of paintbrushes here. But the Kolinsky sables are all in one, and they only ever get used for water-based paint. For everything else, especially oils and whatnot, I will use it's the Pro Arte miniature series. I think they're about £3 each, £3.50 each, but they are brilliant brushes. They are really good for oil painting, washes, everything. They're just utterly fantastic brushes. Alan Kelly says, I use Starship Filth on everything. The shade of Starship Filth is sensational for doing cockpit shading, shadows on undercarriage, etc., etc. And Peter Marshall says, Starship Filth is great for wheel wells. I will completely concur with that. I used something almost a similar color before I actually bought the oil brushes. I actually used it on the underside of a Tamiya Tomcat for the white, and it just it was like an olivey kind of browny green. It would be the reverse color of what you think you use, and yet it was perfect. It was absolutely perfect. Anyway, I'll pop in again probably about 20-25 minutes. If you keep the comments coming in, we'll feed them through to Ivan. But for now, it's Ivan's show, so back.
Smashing. I've just looked at the Starship Filth, and it's not called Starship Filth. It's called Starship Filth. That's a new one. Don't know if that's a typo or, but yeah, not a color I've used yet. But I can looking at the color, I can see why it would be so good on landing gear and wheel wells, and that I can definitely see the purpose of that. And again, with oils, you can make washes and pin washes and such. But yeah, we're going to get back to this. Like I said, I'm going to do one more panel of the brown, and then we're going to move on to the lighter colors to add a bit more contrast. So I'm going to pick this panel for no reason whatsoever. And like I said, I do love doing this because it gives you the chance to determine what you want to stand out. It's like that expression, your model. Do what you want with it. But when it comes to oils, you can completely change how the model is perceived. I don't know if that makes sense. That sounded a little bit too philosophical for 11:45 in the morning. Keep that one too over there so I know which it is. Yeah, it's like I said, this idea for me, it definitely came from Night Shift modeler Martin Kovac, the genius that is. Amazing armor builder. And this is one of those techniques. Oils, I was really reluctant to try oils a few years ago because I'd always heard, oh, they take days and weeks to dry. Why would you bother? And then I realised the person who told me that was talking utter nonsense. Now I've put an awful lot of oil on this one, so this is going to take a heck of a lot of blending. And some areas you find will look a bit odd until you finish the surrounding area. Like the one panel just look recessed and the rest very flush. It will look a little bit odd. Now, when I take the brush off camera, what I'm doing is wiping that on a bit of kitchen roll. I'm just removing any excess oil that's picked up from the brush when I blend it. So when I do that, I'm wiping it on kitchen roll and just removing any excess oil. Definitely not licking the brush. I know a lot of people like to lick the paintbrushes, but my word, you don't be doing it when you're working with oils. Now, in some cases, when I'm doing this, I'll sometimes find, well, I've added quite a lot of shadow in the area and I've lost a lot of colour. Like, there's a lot of brown there, so I've lost the intensity of the green camouflage or the red brown or even the dunkelgelb. But bear with us, we will bring it back. When it comes to modelling, this is oils, definitely my favourite stage. So I find I've blended that far too much. There was too much oil on that panel. So we're just going to come in with just a regular cardboard shafted cotton tip, none of that plastic, and just do a few circles in the middle. It's just going to remove excess. As you can see, it does pick up a little bit. It's just removing some oil, and that's why I like the oils, because they do stick. So I'm happy with that, and just re-blend the edge. And as you can see, that panel completely different from the other four that surround it. So, say we want to add now a highlight contrast to the panel. What we're going to take is, well, the colour we use is determined by what base colour we have. So for this, we're going to, again, do the transmission panel at the front here. We could come in with just a white, but that would completely kill the saturation. It would just dull it out. We don't want to be doing that. We could use a dust or a buff. Well, we are going to mix these, and oils you can mix. So we're going to take a buff and a little bit of yellow. Actually, looking at it, the buff might just be enough. So give it a mix, because as you can see, if I grab the white, now you won't be able to see it, but they do separate quite a lot. So give them a good shake up. Looking at it, we might add just a little bit of yellow to this. But again, the reason I decant this is, though it's very convenient to have the brush, you can see it does get a bit gunked up. The brush is a little bit clumsy. That's the reason I do decant them. And then I just get the ultimate control of how much I use, and I find myself not wasting oil. And then with our ammo yellow, just again, give it a bit of a shake. Put this just in a separate one. We're not going to need much yellow. I don't think we're going to need hardly any. Because I love the oil brush. There's just no mess. That's what's great about them. There's not oils and there's oil everywhere, and having to soak the linseed oil or whatever the carrier is from tube oil. They're just really convenient. Put the lid back on, done. Put them to one side. So we're going to just mess around and maybe just trial the colours a little. So very lemony yellow. I find the yellow is very pigmented. So a little really dramatically changes the colour you mix it to. Yeah, that's a good colour. I'll put that to one side because that is also a brush that we are no longer going to be able to use. Just trying to pick a nice, clean, small brush that isn't a natural. That one will do. Right. So we take our lightened buff colour. And now we're going to paint this. So, like I don't want to keep repeating myself, but like we did before, we made this panel look like it's protruding from the surface. So we're now going to draw the light colour on the inside edge of the panel. And that does include, no, it doesn't. We're not going to draw it on the red, brown, and green camouflage because that will completely desaturate the colour. So just drawing it on the edge of the yellow areas. This is quite a long process, but I think it's one that's well worth doing. So I'm happy. As you can see, we've just drawn, again, just on the inside. It does look a little bit like it's been chipped. Just on the inside areas. Again, just that's a clean brush that we haven't yet contaminated with other oil. I know I could very easily just clean the brushes off, but again, like I said, if I wash them off with white spirit or odorless thinner, then the brush is like permanently wet. I can't just dry it on paper towel. It will remain moist for quite a long time. So if I put it in thinner, that's it. The brush is kind of out of use for that session. So we're just going to blend. This time we'll blend in this colour inwards into the panel. And again, with this, if you're a bit heavy-handed with your oil and it gets in a panel line, a day or two later, once the oils are dried, or if you feel you're ready or want to, you can just reapply a pin wash. Now, once it's done, the contrast will look extraordinarily heavy. And that's what I want. That's a style I like. But the reason I also go very, very heavy with the contrast is because when future layers come into play, like we start doing a lot more weathering, this does fade back and gets knocked back by other stages very, very quickly. It's the same with paint modulation. I love very heavily modulated paint, but I find you have to really overdo it to compensate for future weathering stages because it will just completely get knocked back. I've learned that on models before. I thought I'd done quite a heavy job on modulating, say, green, and then I've come in, by the time I've done oils, I started adding dust effects and weathering and earth effects. The modulation's gone. It's completely been killed off. And that's why I like oils, because say if you do destroy that contrast, you can come in at any stage and just re-add it back. You don't have to worry about, masking off. I have to just mask off this panel and spray it carefully. You don't. You can just come in with oil and re-intensify highlights or shadows at any stage. That is a great thing about oils. Now, I only started using oils in about late 2017. And I'd have to say, I think it's one of the best products. I said products, one of the best modeling tools that I have ever used. Right, as you can see, yes, that does look very light. Maybe should have used a slightly darker color. But that will completely get knocked back, especially when you start getting into chipping and rust effects. The contrast with these two panels is extraordinary. Looking here, you wouldn't think that was just a completely flat piece of plastic. It does look like this is now a raised piece, a separate piece from the actual front armor panel, and that's what I love. You can do this in the paint stage. You can mask off carefully, use thinned paint to create the shadows, and then highlight it with a lighter paint. But I find it's just so much easier if you. I think it's more fun as well if you come in and do it with oils. No, you don't have to be completely neat. You can do a few random dots in the middle of panels as well, just to break up a monochromatic surface, give a more mottled effect. The recent ICM truck I finished had a lot of work done with oils. And by the time it was actually finished, with all the dust effects, earth effects, you wouldn't actually tell. And that was a lesson I learned. Overdo it. It's easier said than done. Fear factor can definitely play play a role in modeling. I mentioned this last night when chatting to the guys. I'm very reluctant to try new techniques because of the fear of them going wrong or just not looking how I intended them to look. And as you can see again, that driver's hatch completely stands out now from the surface. Ambient occlusion, forced contrast, call it what you want. I just think it looks awesome. So we're not going to do any more on this. This was just a demo piece for this model. What I'm going to do now is briefly show you an oil dot filter. And I'm going to do it on the side. I was going to use the Panzer, but as you can see, it's so busy. I don't really have a good flat panel that I can demonstrate it on. Oil dot filters. This time we are going to be using thinner because we need that to streak down the dots and such. Oil dot filters, like I said at the start of this, really change the fresh look of the surface. That can sound just a little bit odd, but you need to pick the right colors for what you're working on. So for this yellow, obviously I'm going to want a bit of a vibrant yellow. I'm going to take a buff. I try and avoid white. This is extremely pigmented. A little bit of this can completely wash out the oil dot. I've maybe put 1 or 2 dots on and the white overpowers everything. It's a fantastic color, but I tend to avoid white on an oil dot filter. So we're gonna use a bit of dark brown again. We're not gonna use a blue. I want to try and avoid blue. We're gonna use a mid brown. You know what? I'm happy with those choices. So we're just gonna give these once again a quick mix up. Doesn't take long. There's not an actual awful lot. Now, because it's an oil dot filter, we're only putting little dots over the surface. So I am going to just use the included brush. Dot, 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 dot. There isn't any method in this. It is just putting random dots on the surface. We're done with that colour. I'm going to try and keep lighter colours to the top. You know what? Just spickled a little bit of a yellow there, taking it out the tube. Be careful with that. If you do that and flick it, it will spatter a little. Now you might think these colours are a little bit intense. The yellow, like I said, is very strong. We're not going to do too much of that. And then we're going to keep some darker colours towards the bottom. We are going to put a couple midway up, but try and keep the darker towards the bottom. Again, that helps with natural lighting. You know what? Just to be a little bit different, we might put a dark green in there. Green can actually really help and add to the... Well, this is fresh. You can tell this has been never been used. That's a good point. I haven't used green yet. That's a shocker. That'll do for now. Again, if we're not happy with it, we can just add more dots and blend. So I know Mig Jimenez, I think a month or so back, did a dot filter demonstration. It looked awesome. Mine's going to be nowhere near as good, but we can but try. Now, sorry if you can hear me fumbling for a flat brush. I'm trying to find a flat brush. That's not what I'm after. I do apologise. One brush I didn't actually think I was going to need. Then I decided I was going to do one of these. Right, we're going to use a flat-ish brush. Nope, we're good. Not use this one yet. So I would usually use a wider brush than this. It would be considerably wider than this, actually. The other brushes I have are not flat enough. This will do. I'm not going to get too hung up on the brush I'm using. So you can see we've got lots of random dots on this surface. And what we're going to do, we're going to take some thinner. This is odorless thinner. This is the 502 thinner. I have run out of my ammo thinner. So we're going to wet the brush. Then we're going to take most of it off on paper towel. So the brush is moistened. It's not soaking wet. Now this bit always scares me. And then we're going to, actually just a little bit less thinner on that. And then we're just going to streak. Now this bit always is, at this stage it's like, what are you doing? That looks crazy. I have to be careful, especially we've got an exhaust pipe here. So whatever oil I'd get on the brush, just try and blend around it. You can see it's shiny now, but that's quickly, very, very quickly drying up. So we're just going to leave it a second. I don't like to do all this quickly in one swooping motion. I will admit maybe put a little bit too much green on there. But again, we're going to take a little bit of thinner, most of it off. And we're just going to keep blending. And it might look like you remove most of it by the time you're done. But once it dries, the effect comes back. It dries, and then you will see just a bit of hair in that, and then reblend that down. And then clean the brush off. And again, just this is a more subtle dot filter. Some of them you can do on a dead flat surface and have all the oil completely stick. They do look really cool. But this is just one of those situations where I'm not brave enough to do that yet. Maybe on another demo piece one day. Just not on this one. Now, one thing I will fully admit is I shouldn't have put a green on this. The green just doesn't work. It does make it look a bit mossy. But this is just one of those situations you live and you learn. It's like, right, well, I won't use the green again. You do have to kind of just work out what colours work for which base colour. Again, just clean the brush. Get most of the paint that you've blended out. Moisten the brush, remove most of the thinner. Just keep streaking down. You tend, with this technique, you streak with gravity. Now, this exhaust pipe is a bit of a nuisance. should have left this off. We're going to leave that to one side to dry for a little bit, and we're going to come back and look at the effect once it has dried. Just put that over. I don't want to be spilling thinner everywhere. That's another thing I do far too often. Spill things. Now, one technique I did really want to test out. I have the cowling for this P47. I think this is a beautiful scheme, but what I want to do again is a bit like the ambient occlusion, but I want to just differentiate the panels because this cowling is made up of a few different panels. I just want to kind of make the blue pop a bit more because it's all very just blue at the minute, shiny blue. We might do a little bit of work on the invasion stripes if we have time, but then I realised this time is going extraordinarily quick. I didn't think it would. Now you can see this blue is darker than the paint blue we have. So we're going to, again, put some blue in our palette. Don't need too much. We're going to take some white. Again, not a lot. This white is very strong and it goes a long way. And I like these metal aluminium palettes because just you take a bit of kitchen towel, a little bit of thinner, wipe it down, fresh as new. Fresh as new? As good as new. Fresh. Right, I have a small brush here. This is an extraordinarily small brush. Again, we're just going to mix the paint till we are at an appropriate colour. Now, this is going to be a bit tougher because you might see an exact... This is very shiny. You can see the cowling is quite shiny. Why gloss might be a problem for oils not sticking. I'm going to try and demonstrate that. See, I can see already with each brush stroke, it's just smushing around. It's not sticking to the surface. This is actually a good example of why probably gloss, excuse me, isn't a good surface to do oils on. It's good for the sense that you can remove the oil very, very easily. But apart from that, it just doesn't want to stick at all. Right, so we have a brush here which is dry and not dirty. So we have the top of the cowling. I want to make some of these panels, again, look a bit more dimensional, like they're protruding from the surface. A bit like we did before, we're just going to blend downwards. Now, this is sticking, which is nice. I did this on, I don't know if any of you have seen it. It was an article I did for Model Airplane International. It was the ICM B-26, the World War II bomber. I did this on the engine cowlings. I had them painted blue. I thought, oh, it's a bit boring, that blue. It just looks blue. But I didn't really want to get the airbrush out and start painting stuff again. So I just grabbed some oil, went along some of the panels, just along the panel edges, and it really, really made a difference. One thing I try and do is blend in one direction. The moment I say that, I blend sideways, but there's a little stubborn piece just there. With the final blending strokes, just blend in one direction. It keeps it really neat. And you're not going to be able to see it just yet because it's quite shiny. And the camera is reflecting a lot of light. But I'll be able to show you in a brief moment why oils are so convenient. And I think, like many people, when these oil brushes came out, people were like, oh, another gimmick. Just some oil in a mascara tube. But I'll fully admit, I thought that. Until I tried them. And then my opinion was completely different. The formula of the oil is extraordinarily good. It's not just oil in a tube with a gimmicky brush. The brush is extremely convenient. The tube is good because it prevents spills. There's like a rubber seal in there that if you tip it up, oil's not coming out. It's really convenient, really good. And I just, even if it weren't for the tube and the brush, I think the oil formula is just superb. And you can see how quickly I'm doing this. It doesn't have to be a job that takes days. You don't have to get too hung up on it, because if you don't like it, you can remove it with thinner or just a paper towel if it's on like a gloss surface like this. Or if you love the effect but you find it vanishes later on, you can just do it again, just add more. And this is why oils, for me, will be my favourite stage of modelling, always. And why I think every modeller should at least give oils a try. I think they are so good. They're an invaluable thing to have in the arsenal. I was really reluctant to try oils for whatever reason. Right, it's quite hard because it's shiny, but you might be able to see the blue. I don't know if the stream quality is going to be enough to pick it up, but the blue is a bit more. I don't want to say dimensionally. It sounds like such a crap word, but there's a bit more going on. It's not just blue, and we can bleach out the red a little bit as well. We do have a red primer color here, which is like more of a pink. But we're going to add a tiny bit of white to that. Running out of brushes, they're all contaminated. The thing is, with oils, you can't actually go wrong. If you hate it, you remove it. It's as simple as that. If you don't like the effect, change it. Oils aren't permanent. Nothing's permanent. Everything can be fixed. Starting to sound a bit like Dr. Phil now, I know. I apologise, but it's true. I, for many years, didn't get really any modelling done because I was so hung up on mistakes. And mistakes can be very, very easily fixed.
I'm just going to pop in here for a moment, Ivan, if you don't mind, because we've got some questions building up here. But I would always say mistakes are what you have to make in order to actually get anywhere.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's a learning curve. It's a learning curve. You know, the old cliche, you learn from your mistakes. But honestly, and this comes back to what we're always saying is, if people didn't try things, somebody didn't, you know, however many years ago, suddenly go, I wonder what happens if I remove most of the paint from a paintbrush and then actually try applying it. You know, it all starts from somebody going, hold on, lads, I got an idea. You know, yeah. So, right, we have a question from Jez. He says, Ivan, do you apply the same techniques of applying the oil brushes to aircraft as well as armor, or is there a different approach?
That's a great question.
It's a very good question.
For me, I really got into oils because I was doing a lot of armor. So with this, because the P47's already had oils on it, you might be able to see some panels are darker than others. So in short answer, yes. If I want a panel to look slightly more recessed, because we know what aircraft are like, they're not smooth. There's panels all over the place. I will do that, and I have done that with this one. Like I don't know if the camera's really going to pick it up, but the machine gun panels are darker. I wanted them to look slightly recessed from the surface. So I'll apply them the same on aircraft, and you can see the word has gone from my head.
Ailerons.
There we are. The ailerons are darker. They've added a shadow, and that really makes them pop from the surface. Mm-hmm. It's a shame I never finished this model because I think it looks fantastic. But yeah, I will use the same technique on aircraft.
Mm-hmm. We have another question here from it's from Jez again. Jez is being a very good student today, which is what we like. Jez says, once you have finished the oils, do you protect it with a coat of varnish or some sort before attempting to add pigments or any other weathering process?
I don't like pigments. I find myself not really using them. I find them messy. And I think some techniques you can get with pigments, you can actually do with oils. But no, once oils are on, once I'm at that stage where oils are on, nothing gets sealed. There is no clear coats ever after that. So there'll be one clear coat, and that'll be usually after paint, and that's it. Maybe to seal the decals in, because I've always had to, because there's been many times where I've been doing oils or enamels, and it's got under a decal, so they need sealing. Once I've sealed the decal, no clear coats touch it. That's it. Everything is just layers and layers of different techniques.
Mig Jimenez mentioned this on one of his videos because he said that he doesn't even seal pigments in. And he's very much of the opinion, and I kind of, again, this is how you suddenly shift your perspective on things, is that he said that, you know, other than perhaps a sealing coat to make sure that, you know, to protect the decals, it's from that point on, that's it. He doesn't apply any more varnishes or anything. It's purely down to the, you know, everything remains unsealed. And his reasoning was, and I completely agree with this, is that way you build up more of a depth to the patina of what's going on.
Exactly.
Because you're getting different sheens, you're getting different effects and everything. And, you know, I mean, I found myself now with armor, I will seal the decals with another layer of gloss, but then I'll give the entire model a sealing coat of like a satin varnish. Now we're talking about AFVs here. A coat of satin varnish, then I will let the weathering effects, the washes, the oil brushes, everything else dull down the finish. So if you still get little patches of sheen in places, it just makes everything, it adds more dynamics to the finish. If I was to then, which is what I used to do, was at the very last stage, I would mix up some matte varnish and probably add a little bit of grey or sand to it as like almost like a filter to tone everything, blend everything, spray it over everything. It killed it dead. It does,
yeah. I last time I used a matte coat was when I did the Trumpeter Fairy Firefly. I had all these nice techniques of oils, pin washes, and there was nice bits of sheen on the surface in matte areas, and there was like oils and stuff. And then I did a matte coat, and it's like, oh, all that work I've done to create them layers, it's just been killed.
The effects are still there, but the depth, it's like the colors are still there, but the depth from their actual substance has suddenly disappeared. And you look at it and you think, oh, it's gone. It's absolutely gone.
Yes.
And we're just seeing Alan Kelly makes a good point. He says, for me, an oil dot wash on an aircraft would go with the airflow. Absolutely. That's something I kind of experimented with. It's what I used to call false rivets, is that I used to get a toothpick and some oil paint, and I would kind of paint rows of false rivets or fasteners along panel lines on the wing in certain places, not everywhere, just in certain places. Let them dry for probably about 20 minutes, and then with a brush with a tiny amount of thinner in it. I mean, quite literally, I almost just got a flat brush and showed it a bottle of thinner, and that was enough. And then I would just blend everything back. And what you end up with is you get these very faint streaks coming back, but you've still got that little bit of the dot that you've applied, so that it does look like dirt and grime coming out of that's been caught and is just dragged along the airflow. But as I said, I didn't do it over the whole airframe. I would concentrate it in certain areas, so that you're concentrating where potentially all the muck would actually kind of accumulate. I think this is the thing with weathering, is that you do get modelers who say, oh well, a real aeroplane, people weren't doing that. They weren't kind of painting weathering onto it. No, a real aeroplane goes through extremes of temperature and speed. A plastic model doesn't. So what you're trying to do is you're just trying to create an effect, an impression. And I think you mentioned Martin Kovac, who is an utter genius. He said that he doesn't really worry if his models don't look realistic. And I completely agree.
I do not care about realism. I'd rather have a very interesting looking model than a realistic one.
But sometimes that interesting looking model can actually convey a sense of realism. It's utterly bizarre, but the French have a word which is trompe l'oeil, which effectively means to deceive the eye. And Dave makes a good point. It says, depends on what you're trying to replicate. If they are aeroplanes, if they're left out in the rain, you can get streaks going down rather than along the fuselage, which is something you do notice on exhaust staining, is that sometimes you will get that plume coming out from the exhaust, but then you'll also get vertical streaks from rain marks or other kind of gravity assisted weathering. So keep the questions coming, folks. We'll leave Ivan to it, and I'll butt out now, and we'll see you, Ivan, probably again in just over 25 minutes. So bye.
Smashing. As you can see in that chat, I have flipped from the cowling to the aircraft. One area I really like to see the oils, especially on a P-47, is this wing group. It has such a nice shape, but it's a shape I like to accentuate. So where we have this wing group join, I like to make that look slightly. Well, it is proud of the surface. They are panels that join the wing and fuselage together. They make that really smooth aerodynamic bend. They are on top, so I want them to look like they are standing proud of the surface. They are molded that way. I just like to make that look a little bit more obvious. So what I'm doing is just adding a little bit of. I use dark. I never use black. I find myself never using black oil. So we've gone in again. We're just adding more brown to the edge of this wing. We're just blending it out to the wing. It's sad. The more I play with this model, I find it really sad that I never finished it. The reason I never finished it is I snapped the rear tail wheel and I couldn't find it. I didn't have the skills to. I still don't have the skills to scratch build one. But oils are awesome, and I will keep saying that. And the thing about these oil brushes is, they're extraordinarily cheap. They are very, 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 very affordable. So there's no excuse to not have some sort of oil in the toolbox. And one thing I do want to mention is I'm finding myself. I was in a bit of a rut. I wasn't doing any modelling whatsoever. I haven't done any for a month. I think the Telford Blues have contributed towards that. But one thing I am finding has helped an awful lot is the Telford Clan. Nice Facebook group chat I'm in. There's a lot of inspiring work in there. And for example, Alan Kelly, who's watching and doing a lot of chat, his aircraft builds are phenomenal. He's got a style I very, very much appreciate. There's a really nice contrast to his work. He does this really cool pre-shading technique. It's not like your normal pre-shading where it's just black lines along panel lines and such. It's like a modulate. It's a bit like what I'm doing with oils, but it's done pre-shading. So when he puts his paint down, a lot of this work's already done, and it looks awesome. So there's that group that's filled with tons of talented modelers, and that has really helped inspire me to at least try and get back to the bench. Like I said last night, I have so many bloody models, and I've got the time to build them. I just don't. And it's a real shame having money just sat there doing nothing. So any bit of inspiration you can find, run with it and make the most of it, because it doesn't last forever. I'm sorry, this is really turning into philosophy corner with Ivan, but I'd say it's a good little bit of advice. When you're inspired and when you've got the drive to do something, make the most of it. Because if you could bottle it and sell it, you'd be a billionaire. And on this P-47, there's a very obvious protruding panel that runs along the belly of this aircraft. I'm trying to, once again, because that stands proud at the surface, add a fake shadow to that. Again, right here, that looks crazy. That's very, very aggressive. But again, it's not really been blended yet. It will subtle itself down. Subtle itself down. What a terrible phrase. It will be a lot more subtle once I've blended it. There we are. But this is a bit of an odd request. But if anyone does have a spare Tamiya P47 tail wheel they're not going to need, please let me know, because I'd love to get this finished. And one thing I do want to, I've said this before, but this aircraft, because it was painted in MRPs and there's not a single decal on it, all been painted with a mask set. Again, no clear coat. There's been nothing, just MRP. This is onto just burr paint. And that's why I do like MRPs, because I'm finding myself less and less, especially with aircraft. I don't have any of the armor colors. With MRP, I can just do everything on top of paint. Again, just making sure your blend's smooth. This effect can be killed very, very quickly if you have a very messy blend that's got brush marks in it. And the good thing, because I'm using a very dark brown, in some areas, it helps the illusion of grease. It looks like grease and oil, especially against the white. It looks oily. And I think invasion stripes are extremely fun to weather. Or ID bands, not invasion stripes, I apologize, ID bands. So you can see the contrast we've got there. That's extreme. You know what? It's not, on the camera, that looks a lot heavier than it is. That is not that heavy. That camera makes that look insanely aggressive. So I'm just going to blend it a little bit more to compensate for how the camera looks. Because it's not that bad. That makes it look crazy. Yeah, well, it is what it is. Now, we have the canopy, which fit phenomenally, by the way. But again, I just want to differentiate the canopy frame from the fuselage. It's kind of all one color. So, dark brown line following the canopy frame. Not going to do it on the front canopy because that's molded into the fuselage. This bit is a moving piece. So on a real thing, if you have areas that are movable, so like ailerons, landing flaps, tail, the rudder, horizontal and vertical stabilizers, and then you've got access hatches, cowling flaps, anything like that, add shadows to them because they move. And in a lot of those areas, you'll get like grease buildup or dust or smoke. Especially on cowling flaps. Another area I'm going to try and get some work done on. Trying to handle this now and not get fingerprints in all the oil. Now, this isn't working as well as I would like it to, so it's one of those. If we don't like it, cotton bud, gone. Just like that. If you don't like it, just remove it. It is as simple as that. And I'm getting awfully cluttered on this work surface. Brown, excellent colour for yellow. Like we demonstrated on the Marder. So, again, with this panel, I could decide which bits I want to look slightly protruding. I'm going to go with the back is slightly lower than the panel behind. See how it looks on the white. I'm skeptical at the minute. So thin line. Try and keep your lines quite thin. Been quite a sad reality actually playing with this aircraft, because I've not really properly worked on an aircraft model since the ICM Invader. I think that was the last aircraft I really fully committed to building and getting through. And to be fair, it was a kit that I didn't really like. A lot of work went into that kit. See, depending on the thickness of your line, that dictates how aggressive and big your shadow is. Because I kept that line very, very small, on that yellow panel that is exactly the effect I want. If I could do that on every single panel on the wing, that's what I'm going for, because it's very subtle, but it just adds that very small bit of contrast between the two panels on a flat surface. That really does add a lot. So if I could do that everywhere, and variations on different panels, not always at the back of each panel, I would be very delighted with that. One thing I don't do with my aircraft, I don't chip them. I once chipped an aircraft, a Focke-Wulf model with lots and lots and lots of silver chips. I'm just never happy with them. I'm not very good at chipping. So on armour, I love it. But for aircraft, I never seem to get it right. I think with aircraft, it is just one of those things. You're either good at it or not. And it seems to be one of those things I'm not. And to be fair, sorry, I just need a drink here. I'm getting a bit dry-throated. To be fair, I haven't lost it. I feel not wanting to get back to aircraft because I've done so much armour. I don't really want to get back to aircraft because I feel like I've forgotten the process of building them. Building them's easy, but weathering them, I got into such a system of building the armour. I'm kind of frightened about going back to aircraft because I've forgotten the order in which way I do things. And the last thing I attempted, Edward Hellcat, for a magazine, it's back on the shelf now. Let's just say that, because it didn't go well. It did not go well. Sorry, just trying to work out best way to get this in shot. Again, keep your lines as thin as possible. I just think you get a much more subtle, but a much more nicer effect. And at the risk of sounding controversial, I think the Razorback in olive drab is the prettiest P-47 there is. Sorry, bubble top fans, but that is not for me. And I don't like natural metal finish. I don't like silver. I'm sorry. Give me olive drab over aluminium any day. Now, from a distance, that just looks like I've done quite a heavy pin wash. But if you move in, you can see it really breaks that surface up. It's such a simple technique. You put a line of oil down and blend it. It's as simple as that. And you can really make a surface pop. I don't really know what else to say about that. It's just very simple. So we're going to do a couple more panels. And notice that, as well as I'm using oils to give different illusions to the surface. Oils are also good for weathering effects. Like you can get oils. But I've got a dark mud. If you thin that down, and I do it in a bit of a tappy, stabby motion. Say on the base of my on the interior on the floor of my T60, That was a white interior, which white, always fun to weather. I coated the area with, I brushed the area with thinners, odorless thinners, and then with the oil brusher, I tapped in areas that it just spread out nice and even, and then just kept stippling and stabbing the area. Once it dried, it looked like an accumulation of dirt and mud and dust. And you can do that with different colors, and it really is. It's very nice. That's why I don't use pigments. I can find that oils can do the jobs that pigments do. Obviously, the technique to apply them is very different. I don't like pigments just mainly because they're messy, and I'm just not very good at using them. I can never seem to get the effects that I see everyone else get. It's like when other people use like dust and dirt, it looks like dust and dirt. Whereas when I did it, it looks like, how do I put it? It doesn't look good. It just looks like pigment has been stabbed on the surface, like plop, done. It doesn't look like an accumulation. A technique I do need to refine and work on because I'm not very good at pigments. So that's why I like oils. I find oils are extraordinarily versatile. And very easily, if you put a podcast on in the background, some music, you can be at your desk for hours working with oils, and it never gets boring. What this has done is encouraged me to carry on working on this model, though. One thing I absolutely do not claim to be the master of oils. I just enjoy them. And I think the main thing is if you enjoy a technique, you find yourself getting quite good at it. If there's a technique you absolutely detest doing and hate doing, you're not really going to improve because you don't give it the energy or passion you would to a technique that you really enjoy. So I really enjoy painting and weathering. That's my area. That's my favorite thing. Building, for me, I try and get things built quick so I can get to the stage I enjoy. Doesn't mean I rush them because I think you can always see a rushed model. It's always evident when a model's been rushed. So it's just a case of blending, having a look, seeing if you blend it a bit more. If you're happy with it, you can leave it. Or if you think, not so good, you can come back later and still blend it. But it's safe to say, I've certainly binned more models than I've built through mistakes and mess-ups, which, rather than trying to overcome, have unfortunately defeated me. And as I get a little bit older, I say that like I'm an old man. As I get a bit older, I try and fix issues rather than let them get on top of me. And then I can look at it in a wider view. It's like, well, it's a model, and that's all it is. It's not the end of the world. It's some plastic, some glue, and some paint. Are you really going to let that ruin your day? And I do charge by the hour for these philosophy lessons, by the way. I have many appointments available. don't find yourself don't force yourself to do stuff. I know I said the other night I have to force myself to sometimes I'll pick a model and work on it. That's forcing myself to make a decision. If you're, say, tired and you're at the workbench, don't be like, oh, before I go to bed, I'm gonna make myself do this. It's like, well, no, if you're not in the mood for it, don't do it, because then you will mess something up, and then you definitely won't want to return to doing that model. I say all this because I've done it. It's not just because I've heard other people. I've done all this. I am terrible for it. And I'm going to keep repeating this dark brown. Absolute favourite colour. If I was to be doing the effects I'm doing now with black, I think it would look dreadful, to be honest. I'm absolutely not putting any thinner whatsoever on this model. I actually really only have the thinner there for when I'm doing, say, mud effects, oiled up filter, or cleaning my brushes. When I'm doing effects like these to change the surface of a model, as you can see the difference between these two wings now. It doesn't look that great on camera, but in person it looks wonderful. There we are. You can see the difference with the wings. Yeah, this effect is just so easy to do. And adds the contrast that I'm looking for. Now, just gonna, while I've got a bit of time left, maybe just a little bit, just try and make the black on the invasion stripes a little bit more interesting. So we're taking a bit of medium grey. I need a brush that's clean, which is none. That's had buff on it. That is a close enough colour where it won't show. We're going to take the grey and put it at the front of this panel. There. And here. There was me worrying about filling an hour. Now I feel I'm running out of time. This has been too much fun. Now that is the reason I wanted to keep that brush separate. That's how thinner on it. And you can see it's wet there. That's just completely removed the grey paint I've added. That is why I don't like thinner for this effect. But luckily it was only a tap. So it starts off with brushing it back, feathering it side to side to get rid of the brush marks, and feathering it back again. Feathering it back, side to side for the brush marks. And then streaking it back again. Maybe a tad more grey in this area. But like I said, what I'm doing now can be done with paint and an airbrush and masking tape and steady hands and stuff. But for me, it's just easier to do it with oils. It's quite sad that actually this is some of the best aircraft work I've done on a live demonstration. So you can see it's a high contrast style. It's a I don't want to say comic book style, but it's a style I love. I think that wing looks really nice. Now on camera, it doesn't look as blended as it is. It looks quite blotchy but I can assure you the blend is very smooth.
Alas, Ivan, I'm going to feel like the worst human being on the planet now because I am going to have to. This is what I said to Drew, that originally I think everybody just wanted to do an hour because they felt 90 minutes was going to be like a bit of a stretch, but easily people could do 90 minutes. It flies by.
This was pretty much done now anyway. I was just doing extra bits.
Yeah.
I was one of the people who said, "Oh, don't know if I can make oil brushes last 90 minutes," and somehow there we are. Time has gone extraordinarily quickly.
I'll just read out a couple of quick comments. Michael Scott says, "Thanks, Ivan. As someone who's only played with old tube of raw umber, this has been very informative." Jez says, "I agree. Great introduction to the world of oils."
Thank you.
And Steph says, "Loving the work, Ivan. Learned loads listening to you." I have to admit, I was supposed to be getting on with my Italeri Semovente, and I was just sat here glued to the screen. It's been absolutely brilliant, Ivan. I really do appreciate you taking time out today to do this. And
thanks for letting me join in. Thanks for organising all this. It's been a pleasure.
Well, I really thank you. I really do appreciate that. And you'll be back on tomorrow, and we'll certainly be bringing you into doing some more demos in the future as well, because this has just been utterly fantastic. So, Ivan, you've been a real star and really added a lot to this weekend. So thanks for that. And we'll catch up with you as and when. So big thank you, everybody, to Ivan Taylor there. Brilliant. I really enjoyed that. So now we move on because we should have, well, at present, I can see the top of Mr. Spencer Pollard's head. It looks like he needs to move his booster chair up a bit. But we will shortly be talking about the brand new Italeri 32nd scale Tornado. I can see Spencer in the background here. He's just still messing around with his equipment, if you pardon the expression. So, yes, this has arrived at Interesting HQ in the last couple of days, and the kit is due to actually reach the UK week commencing the 16th of November, but it's certainly a very impressive package. A lot of bits in there, and it's quite a bit of detail on it as well. So, whilst we're waiting for Mr. Pollard to turn up, he's almost ready now. We were just going to give you a quick reminder of what's coming up today. We've got HQ and chat, which is this now, and then we're going to have be talking about the Italeri Tornado with Spencer. Then Spencer will be doing a modelling demo of his blue foam technique, which I think you're all going to find very interesting. 1:45 to 2:30, we are off the air completely. There'll be dead air for the intermission for light refreshments. And then we're back at 2:30 to 2:45, which is me just yabbering away here. Then to 2:45 to 3:45, modelling demo with Jen Wright. And then we're back to the studio. Then at 4 o'clock to 5 o'clock, modelling demo, or even I was going to say a miking demo with Model Williams, a modelling demo with Mike Williams. Then 7 o'clock, 5 o'clock to 5:30, we've got American modeler and author Chris Buchholz is going to be on. Chris, honestly, he's brilliant. I could listen to him all day. And I had him and Mike Reeves on yesterday. We were just doing like a check of the feed and everything. And I just sat back and let them two go off. It was, honestly, we're going to get those two on at some stage. Then at 5:30 to 6 o'clock, we're going to have Mr. Matt Whiting, from one of the senior designers from Airfix. He's going to be having a chat to us. Ask him any question you want. Just please don't ask him what Airfix are doing next, because obviously he can't tell you. So I think Mr. P is ready. So can you hear me, Mr. P?
Hello. How are you?
Excellent. That's brilliant. Your sound is good. Your picture is good.
Oh,
we are looking.
Slightly blinded by the sun coming in through the.
I'm pretty much the same here. I have a south-facing garden, so I get lots of lovely sunlight here during the day. But at the moment, it is a bit kind of like that.
Hasn't this been brilliant so far? I have to say.
Apart from this morning, with my MacBook, decided to do an update before I rebooted it. I thought we'll just do a quick clear, give it a quick clear and caches and everything, and just be nice and fresh. And during the reboot process, my MacBook went, "Oh, we're doing a reboot. Oh, in that case, then we'll do updates."
Yes.
And it was just like, luckily, I had a plan B. So I was able to do a stream. So you did have at some stage, there was a bit of an error, and everybody got a lovely look at my workshop ceiling, which I'm in the process of replacing. So anyway, never mind.
Yeah.
So
also, I've got to say as well, this has been more nerve-wracking than I expected it. I mean, me and you've been online now for about 6 months, and this morning I've been kind of wandering around the house thinking, what on earth am I doing? It's taking more preparation than the actual scale model world.
I am a complete zen of calmness now.
Oh, blimey. Maybe you've just transferred it across to me via the internet.
Probably, yes. I've transferred my Telford anxiety. No, now we're up and running, and it's fine. I'm just like, it's like I say with Telford, is that I'm horribly anxious, on the journey up there. And even when we're walking around Cosford, and even in the bar at the evening, I'm still, if somebody said there's a car outside, you want to go home, I'd be like, yeah, yes, please.
Yeah. I've sort of got to the point now with this sort of review as well that, despite the fact that this is sort of my job, I found this whole thing slightly nerve-wracking. I think because of what it is and the sort of and the weight for this kit. Really, it's the last time I did one of this was, you might remember, was a certain Tomcat from a certain Japanese company that we did. So I think we need to sort of get cracking on this, don't we?
I don't want to add to our anxiety, but we've just actually had a huge plug for the Festival of Modelling on the Airfix Facebook page. So thank you, Airfix.
Thank you. Yes, as if I wasn't nervous. As if I wasn't nervous enough. I am now about to do a kit review live online.
Okay,
nothing goes wrong.
Let us crack on then. You have turning up here at Interesting HQ the long awaited, and we say long awaited because this has been in the works for at least 2 years now, hasn't it?
Indeed.
The long awaited Italeri Tornado GR4 in 32nd scale.
Absolutely. This I seem to remember the first time this was muted might have been Nuremberg 3 years ago. I seem to that there was hints that Italeri would take the time to do a 32nd scale Tornado GR4. And this week, we finally got hold of a production sample, fully boxed, with all of the decals and everything else. So we can now have a good old look at this kit. You can see the box art here. This kit is very specifically a GR4. Although, having now had a look at it and spent time with the parts and seeing how Italeri have approached this, the kit has to be said is something of a hybrid. It's not an entirely accurate recreation of the Tornado GR4 because there are certain compromises that Italeri have incorporated that allow other versions to be wrung out from this set of molds. I think from the beginning, it's worth saying that from this kit, you can probably do all of the short-nosed Tornado variants. You can do the GR1, GR1A, IDS, ECR, plus the GR4 with slight additions. The kit will allow at some point all of those variants to be modelled from this one box of tricks. That will inevitably mean that Italeri will add some additional parts to this kit to allow that to be the case. But I see no reason from what I've seen in the box that won't be the case. Some of the parts that are already needed for those variants are already in the box. Some of them aren't, but they will be seen. I think
that was to be expected, though, because the Tornado is a big European project aircraft, and Italeri have very obviously the Italians fly them, so Italeri have a strong presence in Italy. They have a strong market presence in Germany. It was always going to be a no-brainer that this was going to be the beginnings of a Tornado family.
Certainly, from what I can see, the IDS and the ECR are likely to be incorporated into that. They will do German and Italian variants from this. The tail and tail inserts for warning receivers on the tail point in that direction, as do the weapons, which we will discuss later on. I think we need to start off with what's actually included in the box. It's obviously a big box. There's a lot of parts in this. I think they're at the thick end of 350 plus parts in this. We start off with the cockpit. The cockpit is is well molded, well detailed. It's traditionally broken down in the sense that it's got a cockpit tub, rear wall, then you've got instrument panels that fit together to create what's essentially a sort of a complete unit that then gets trapped between the nose halves. You can see here the instrument panels. This is the first point of where certain compromises have taken place. These panels don't, certainly the rear panel doesn't accurately reflect the modifications that took place to create the GR4. There are certain things on that panel that don't appear within the GR4. However, the modifications that are needed to change that panel into a GR4 and reflect the detail within the actual aircraft are pretty minimal and likely to be within the realm of anybody with plasticard and rod. Little bits of strip should be able to do that. Removal of some of the panels that are included within that larger section should be fairly straightforward. So I don't see any problems with that. From what I can see, the front instrument panel is essentially what it needs to be. There are inserts that go into those two panels that then create a more three-dimensional look. So again, you shouldn't have sort of too many problems getting the detail to look pleasing enough. Italeri supplies some decals to go onto these panels, I think for like moving map displays, that kind of thing. They don't supply decals for any of the instruments, so you're simply going to have to paint those. One of the things about Tornado's interiors is it's unlike American jets, you don't have black surrounds for the instrument bezels, so it's not going to be too difficult to be able to do that. But you are going to need to be careful and pick out the detail with a fine brush before you move on to completing the cockpit. Moving to the back of the cockpit, there is a rear wall that also includes some nice detail. You can see here that'll allow you to create a busy appearance behind the rear ejection seat. So that's another nice area. You'll also be able to add additional detail to all of this kind of thing. It's worth pointing out before we move on to the seats that Italeri have not taken any time to detail the inner nose walls. So above the consoles, between the sill and the consoles is absolutely bare. I couldn't find any detail within that. Obviously, in the real aircraft, that's not the case. So if you want a truly accurate recreation of the inner walls of the cockpit, you're going to have to do your own work. Sills are very plain. In some regards, although the detail is really nice, you can see it here and is very sharply rendered. It's almost a 48th scale kit that has been scaled up rather than a 32nd scale kit that includes all of the detail that you would expect. But I don't think that's necessarily too bad a thing. And it will allow a certain degree of flexibility should you wish to detail it or rework it. Moving on, we come to the seats. Italeri have gone to town on the ejection seats. I think they're Mark 10s in the Tornado GR4. They're multi-part seats, and you can see that the levels of detail that are included within the kit are really high. So they will build up and look very nice once they're complete. We'll look at this a little bit later on, but also included within the kit is a set of etched details that offer seat straps. The seat straps are relatively simple in their design and what they offer, but the seat straps on the real ejection seats aren't particularly complicated anyway. They're certainly not the 1950s multi-part straps that we've seen. You can see it here, but they combine and build up to create the appearance that we would expect from a 32nd scale seat. I would imagine that already Eduard are sharpening their pencils when it comes to this kit, and they're going to be offering all sorts of additions, including coloured seat straps. However, that will be within their resin range, within their brass range, or within their soft seat straps range, the brass and the kind of paper straps that they create. But as it is, there's enough in the kit to make these seats look busy enough without any particular additional work. Moving on to the rear fuselage, you come to intake trunking. The intake trunks are full depth and full length. They run from just behind the intakes all the way through to the engine faces. they're multi-part, and from what I can see, they're likely to be fairly well hidden once they're inside the fuselage, although there will be, because they're split into two halves, there will be a joint running lengthways between the upper and lower halves of these two intake tunnels. So that might need a little bit of cleaning up, but how much of that will be seen within the intakes is open to some debate. You may just simply choose to ignore it. I don't know. So only construction will take us through to that process, and whether or not it is worth spending additional time cleaning up those two halves. Moving on to the back, to the end of the fuselage, we come to these two RB199 jets, jet engines. Italeri, as in the F104 kit, offered detailed engines. They offered that within the F104, and you were able to take the engine out and to display it on a stand. That's also the case with the Tornado. Two full engines are included within this kit that can be displayed in or out of the model. They only supply, from what I can see, they only supply one engine stand, so one will be inside the aircraft, one will be outside should you choose to do that, along with the engines, which are really nicely detailed. Actually, I was very impressed with the complexity of these parts, although once the engines are inside the fuselage, there's no way of seeing them. But the other thing that they also include within this kit, which I really liked, is the thrust reverser buckets are also posable. You can either have them closed up, or you can have them open, so that there's a level of detail there. The argument against using those in their open position is that often that's only visible once the aircraft is under servicing. However, there might be a case for just showing that one of the engines out on its stand, and then showing the reverser buckets closed just to show off the detail. It's a compromise that you could take should you wish to sort of make the model look more complex. Overall, though, I was really impressed by the engines, and I was really pleased to see those included. I think that's a nice touch from Italeri. They are multi-part. There's a number of parts that go with them. It's not like the Airfix Hellcat that's like 150 parts for these engines. They're much more simplistic in their breakdown and their approach, but I think they'll look nice with underneath paint and with all of the detail picked out. Moving on to the actual rear fuselage, the bulk of the rear fuselage is made up from two large sections. These are really well molded, and they include some very subtle contours that run across the surface of each part. You can see, this is the upper section here. You can see that there are air brake bays that are molded as part of this one large section, and you can see in this image how the sort of the subtly curved nature of the Tornado is captured by Italeri. There's then a lower section, which you can see here. This lower section incorporates the rear wheelbase and also includes two sections that run lengthways along the sides of the fuselage. Anybody that's built the Revell 48 scale kit will have seen something similar in that. So those four large sections essentially create the rear of the fuselage and incorporate within it the mountings for the intake tunnels and also for the engines, plus those inserts for the wings and the sweeping sections. We then move on to some of the smaller details. The kit, as you would imagine, incorporates separate in-flight refueling probe. That allows you to have the refueling probe open or closed. There are photographs of jets with the refueling probe open on the ground, so that's a detail that you can, with impunity, show off on your completed model. Obviously, having this as separate sections allows you to points to other variants and other versions that Italeri will be looking at. Here you can see a section missing. These are the covers for the guns that would appear on different variants of this aircraft. So you can see that those will be covered over on Continental or reconnaissance RAF aircraft. but are used on the one of those will be used on the GR4. I think it's I believe it's only got it's armed with one Mauser cannon, so you can see that those inserts will be pointing to other versions that will no doubt be down the line. Moving on, there's not a lot of kind of tweaks with this kit in terms of open paneling, although there is a radar that goes within the nose cone that I've not photographed for this, but it is there that you can show off and display if you have the nose cone off. But also there's a little electrical bay here. You can see this on the underside of the starboard fuselage. This is a neat little touch. It's only a small detail, but it sort of shows that Italeri were paying attention to some of the sort of finer features. I'm pretty sure that at some point somebody's going to take this kit and open up lots more of these panels and show off some of the insides. But it's nice to see that this kit has included at least one of those bays. Moving on, undercarriage bays that I mentioned earlier on. These are full depth and include some nice ribbing detail and also sort of pointers towards some of the cabling and hydraulic runs that are within each of the gear bays. I haven't photographed the nose bay, but that's an intriguing area because in the kit it tells you that you need to construct that bay flat pack style, so roof and sides, and trap the nose gear once it's complete within that. I couldn't see a way of installing the nose leg without building the bay around it, but I'm sure that if I sort of put some thought to that, that is possible. These ones, though, you can fit the legs once the bays are in place. I think anybody that wants to build this kit and maybe get to town on it will find plenty of detail to add within these gear bays. So, but as it is, that it's a nice level of detail to begin with, and as you can see in this image, it shows how sharply molded this kit is. It is in the main very nicely molded. So it's kind of like a step up for Italeri and perhaps a step up from the F104 that we saw before as well. The kit includes, as you would imagine, all of the flying surfaces, the fins and everything. This shot here shows you that the fin is broken down to allow other variants to be included. So the warning fits on the top of the fin are separate inserts, and you can see them in this picture. And you can also see in here as well that the kit allows the rudder to be deflected slightly, should that be. It's a separate part, and that follows on from the wings that are also broken down to include separate flaps, slats and spoilers. This is where this kit has a major step up from the Revell kit. Revell's kit was produced with simple upper and lower wing sections. Iteleri's isn't. Iteleri's follows Revell's 48th kit in that it includes all of those moving sections within the wing as separate parts. It's an important thing to see this within the Tornado kit because often the Tornado is shown with the wings in dirty and broken up so that they have all of the flaps and the slats drooped away. It's almost unusual to see Tornadoes on the ground with everything pulled in. So to see this was a real boost within this kit. You can see here that on top of the wing is a bay for the spoilers. Whether or not you're going to want to display those up is entirely up to you. Don't really know. Which leads me on to this picture here. These are the parts that create those spoilers on the upper wings. There aren't a lot of ejector pin marks on this kit. However, there are some, and they are in noticeable areas. And as you can see here, they're on the inner faces of those parts. So they're going to need to be cleaned up. Fortunately, these parts are smooth in terms of detail, other than the definite ribbing that you can see here. So cleaning those up shouldn't be too difficult. But it was noticeable that we had those issues on areas such as this, because I couldn't really find them on any other parts. It's not unusual to see them on flat sections like this, but it was noteworthy. I think more than anything else, it's noteworthy. These are separate sections for the the flaps. You can see here that they include very delicate actuators that I'm assuming, I haven't looked at this in any great detail at the moment because I haven't started building the kit, which I will be starting once my demonstration is finished. I'll be working on this afternoon, so I can talk about it in a little bit more detail tomorrow. But how strong these parts are going to be once they're in place is again open to some debate. I refer back to the Revell 48 scale kit. You may remember that was very delicate in terms of these parts, and almost any kind of knock broke them away. So I'm looking at these with a certain amount of trepidation at the moment, but I'm not entirely unhappy with the way that Italeri have broken these down. Only time is going to tell as to whether or not those parts are going to be durable once the model is finished. Also, I sense that each of those parts is going to need to be put into place once the model is painted and weathered. So again, that might need some forethought. It might be something that you need to pre-plan ahead. You certainly won't be able to glue these parts in place and then paint this model and then weather it, decal it. You'll need to leave these all separate and leave the wings in their stripped back form. Can't actually see any way as well with this kit of building it without slotting the wings into place before the fuselage half is complete. So once again, it's going to be difficult to see how that's made any easier. It's not like Tamiya's Tomcat where the wings sit in on the spars. This is very much a traditional trap it above the upper and lower sections. So we move on to smaller details. These are the undercarriage parts. As with the nose gear, the undercarriage is broken down into smaller sections and broken down into halves, which I never like to see on a kit, especially one that has details such as this along both front and rear faces. There's going to be some intriguing cleanup of these parts, and hopefully the fit is such that cleanup isn't too arduous. But the undercarriage underneath the Tornado, though superficially simple, is quite a complex shape. So I can understand why they've broken it down like this, but I foresee some gnashing of teeth when it comes to assembling these parts and then cleaning them up ready to be fitted in place. Moving on, the kit supplies plastic wheels and tires. You can see here these are the main wheels, and essentially the larger sections are the main tires. But to the side of that, you can also see the tires for the nose wheel. You can see that they're weighted. Intriguingly, the kit also includes tires that are molded in vinyl as well. And so that gives you the option. Personally, I'm going to go for the plastic ones. I'm not convinced by the molding necessarily on the vinyl tires, although you may be able to scuff those up and have those look like they're reasonably realistic. But I think the plastic ones are likely to be the route I go down. The vinyl runner also includes wing seals. You can see them on here looking slightly deformed. I have a concern about these, and once again, my concern will only be affirmed or will be contradicted once the model is being constructed. Being in vinyl, I'm not sure how easy these will be to glue in place. And I noticed from the instructions that there is a plastic section that fits behind these that then traps them into the side of the fuselage. But even so, I'm still slightly concerned by these pieces, and I almost don't really understand why they were molded in this material and why they weren't just molded in plastic. It doesn't seem to benefit anything, because unless they're there so that you can swing the wings backwards and forwards, but the only way to swing the wings backwards and forwards is not to have the flaps and the slats deployed. Although within the wings there are pivot points for the weapons, for the pylons, but aircraft on the ground are never have the wings swept back. So the only way that you would be able to display this model is with the wings swept back would be to have everything in place, pulled in, and also then have pilots in the cockpit. There are no pilots. So all of those things in place, I don't really see the benefit of the inclusion of this. I think that's maybe it's something that people will find worthwhile. I can't see it at the moment, and I feel it may be something that causes more problems than solves as construction progresses. Obviously, I'll let you know about that, but at the moment, not massively convinced. Moving on to, we saw it earlier, saw a detail of it earlier on. This is a large photo etch fret that's included within the kit. These are produced by Fotomechanica. We've mentioned these in our news shows before. Fotomechanica seem to be Italeri's go-to etching company now. And these parts are really nicely done. This is a beautiful photo etch fret. These details are there for, there are straps that we mentioned earlier on to detail the seats. There are also areas that go above the coamings and hoods on inside the cockpit. There are also a few details within here for the BOS pods, and also for the thrust reverser bucket mechanisms. There are details on here. You can see that the etching is really clean. The sheet is quite thick. It's not a flimsy sheet. It's nicely done. So I think these will add to rather than detract from what's included in the kit. Obviously, the thickness of the sheet is going to have an impact slightly on the seat straps. You may need to anneal those to allow them to blend more into the cockpit. But overall, I think this is definitely a worthwhile inclusion within that. This is some of the detail of the seat straps. You can see that although they're not up to the standards we would expect from some of the other companies that are producing this type of thing, such as Eduard, they're going to be seen as a worthwhile inclusion. And with a bit of painting and some careful work in terms of manipulation to try and make these look a little bit more little softer, then these will be a worthwhile inclusion. Finally, before we move on to the whiz bangs that are included within the kit, this is the canopy and the clear parts. All of these are really well molded. The glazing is perfectly clear in the kit that I had, and it's the canopy, as you would imagine in a kit of this size, can be posed open as well as closed, and all lights and that kind of thing are all supplied as separate parts, so that will allow us to show those with clear colors on top, which will add another layer of detail. Moving on to what seems to have been a certain amount of consternation from the modelling world. The kit I mentioned earlier on is definitely a hybrid, and that is borne out by the weapons that are included within this kit. If I list what is included, and John is going to take you through the runners that show some of those pieces. The kit includes JDAMs, GBU-12 LGBs, Cerberus pods, alarms, AIM-9Ls, Sky Shadow pods, BOS pods, 2250 litre drop tanks. They also include what look like ASRAMs and AMRAMs as well. The tanks, first of all, that you can see here, these are the 2250 litre tanks. These are only appropriate to the GR4 variant of the short-nosed Tornado family. The smaller 1500 litre tanks that are appropriate to international operators such as Germany and Italy, and also earlier RAF variants such as GR1, GR1A, are not included in this kit. So if you want to build one of those versions from this kit, you'll have to source those tanks from somewhere else or wait for a subsequent release of that. As it turns out, the kit includes weapons for the GR4 variant of this, includes the GBU-12s, includes the BOS pods, Sky Shadow pods, AIM-9Ls, and those tanks. What it doesn't include is a lot of the GR4 specific weapon loads. This is where the conversation has been had, and what that means is, for people who want to build a fully loaded GR4 with some of the more modern weapons that were cleared for this aircraft, the kit doesn't include Brimstone, doesn't include Storm Shadow, Sniper, Raptor, Recce Pod, Lightning Pod, or the Digital Joint Reconnaissance Pod that also has been carried by this aircraft. Those things are not included, and it's only fair that I point that out for people who want to build a fully loaded GR4 from this kit. As it is, you can build a perfectly loaded GR4. That loadout is pretty stripped back and will include the pods and Sky Shadow pods on the outer wing pylons, the 2250 litre tanks on the inner pylons with sidewinders on the rails, and then underneath the fuselage will include four of the GBU-12 LGBs. But everything else is absent. I'm pretty sure that those things will appear from elsewhere, but the debate there will be, how much that adds on to the cost of the $139.99 retail price of this kit. Personally, this doesn't affect me because I don't really load my aircraft up heavily anyway, so I'm not that bothered about the idea that these things are missing. But I think it's definitely worth pointing that out for people who are expecting to see a fully loaded GR4 in this box. That's not the case. Moving away from the weapons, we come on to the marking options for this kit. Here you can see the decals. The decal sheet for this here is really beautifully done and really beautifully printed, as you would imagine, in an Italeri kit. We're likely at some point to have a deeper conversation about the decals in here, because I know John has already noticed that there are a couple of little issues with some of the lettering on some of for some of these options. But we'll leave that to a later date when we can spend more time on this kit. As it is, there are four options within this kit. The first one is ZA542, which is this one here. This is an Operation Telic aircraft from Iraq 2003. This has got a bit of nose art on. This has got Danger Mouse on the nose, which is rather nice. This is a very sort of stripped back grey aircraft. But it's a wartime jet, so it gives modelers the opportunity to build something that would be very heavily weathered. These things were very well used. Moving on, we have the second one, and I guess this is one that will appeal to a lot of people. This is 617 Squadron aircraft. This is ZA367. Again, this one is a wartime jet. This one is from Operation Herrick, Afghanistan, 2010. Again, it's the sort of aircraft that would offer the opportunities for lots of weathering and that kind of thing. It's got full unit markings, as you can see on the top of the fin and also the nose. But overall, it is a great jet, as all of these ones are. Moving on, we then have the third option, which is an aircraft from Goya del Cal in Italy. This one is a 2011 jet from 31 Squadron. I like this one. I like the colour scheme. I like the markings for 31 Squadron jets. I like that yellow and emerald green scheme. So again, it's got full unit markings on, well as full as latter day RAF jets had. And finally, I guess the star of the show is this one here. This is a retirement scheme from 2019. This is likely to be the one that I go for inevitably, I think. This one is ZG775. This one is from 9 Squadron and features a black spine and black fin. It was worth pointing out with this one that this was a matte grey aircraft, but the spine and the fin on this jet were gloss. So anybody that wants to build this aircraft, do not paint this in an overall sheen. That's not how they looked. In much the same way that the Tomcat that I painted that had gloss black fins last year over a weathered grey airframe, this is the same. It's a weathered grey airframe that had a gloss black trim added to it. They weren't. It isn't the same patina across. And I think as this jet is 32nd scale and this kit is 32nd scale, that difference between the patinas across the fin, the spine and the canopy trim and the rest of the aircraft need to be shown for this to look realistic. I love this color scheme. I have to say that over the years there have been some of the Tornado special schemes that I really haven't liked, but I do like this one. I think this is really nice. I think it's nicely done. So this will be a bit of a challenge, I think, and one that'll be like a multi-step approach to essentially build a grey jet and then add the trim on once everything else is finished. I really like this. So overall, this kit has been quite a long time in the making. But I think now that it's here, it offers much to enjoy. I haven't mentioned the surface detail on this just yet, but we will be looking at that tomorrow because, like I say, for the rest of this afternoon, once my demo's done, and for the majority of tomorrow, I hear John laughing there, and the rest of tomorrow, I'm going to start putting this thing together, and that'll give me a better chance to have a look at it and see what it's like. But surface detail on this is a mix in much the same way it was a mix on the F104 as well. There are areas that are really delicate and really fine. Some of them are slightly more definite, and the panel lines are deeper. However, whereas with the F104, that was something that I didn't really like to begin with. Once the model was painted and weathered, I stopped noticing it. It didn't really seem apparent. So again, I'm going to hold off from saying any more about that until the model is underway and we can see it. Overall, though, John will post some links for this. The kit will be available next week. We'd like to sort of call out Jadlam and also, I think, Antix as well. We're going to give you links to both of those retailers who've been very supportive of us over the last 6 months. So we'll give those a call out. The kit retails for $139.99. However, that may change it may lower over the sort of coming months. You may be able to get it slightly different from that. I'm not suggesting there'll be a big difference, but we may see that there's the odd sort of few quid cropped off as this kit appears. So that is the Italeri 1/32 scale Tornado GR4 all kind of wrapped up. Yeah, big kit, lots of parts, and a big project, I think, and one that I think a lot of people will be looking forward to and enjoying over the coming months.
A couple of questions here. Dave Fleming says, I think other than the first one, they are all in medium sea grey, camouflage grey for the Telic one.
Yes, that appears to be the case. Yeah.
That does, yeah. BS 381C 626 camouflage grey to be more precise. The reason why I was laughing was because you said once your demo is done. Well, I think essentially your demo is done, mate, because we are now half past 1. So you got 15 minutes to do a modelling demo. So
in that case, I didn't realise that we'd been on for quite some time, because John and I had actually planned that. Well, in that case, we may as well just chat about the kit for the next 10 minutes, haven't we? One of the things that we sort of talked about when the kit arrived, John and I said, well, we'll just give this half an hour. But I think it's one of those releases that pays us to be a bit more in depth with. It's quite a big.
You can't be brief with something a kit that has got that's that scale with that many parts, which is going to be towards the upper end of a 32nd scale kit in terms of price. You just can't it's not something you can kind of pray-see into a couple of kind of verbal paragraphs, to be honest with you. So
yeah, I think that's absolutely the case. It's when the 32nd scale F104 came out, that was greeted in the same way. And one of the things about these big 32nd scale kits now is price is often something that is discussed. And we, on the Interesting Modelling Co., we don't ever really get into debates about prices because it's such a personal thing, and it's something that's so difficult to benchmark in terms of whether or not it's value for money. What we can say in this case is that this kit is very much up there with the cost of Tamiya's 32nd scale Mosquito, the F14, the F15, those kind of prices. And also we've seen 35th scale kits from the likes of Trumpeter that have been £100. The MLRS that I've got was £90, and that was 3-4 years ago. So I think the days of us being able to expect a 32nd scale kit to come out and it to be £40 is unlikely, because you're not, this is something I do think that we need to perhaps point out, is you're not paying for the box and the plastic parts anymore. You're paying for the R&D. You're paying in the same way that when you buy a PlayStation 4 game, you're not paying for the disc and the box. You're paying for all of the people who have contributed to that. And that's why these things are so expensive now. Things aren't costing a lot, aren't costing pence anymore. That they're really not. I mean, we did mention on our midweek show, didn't we, how much the Monogram B52 was when that first came out? And if we extrapolated that up, that was an eye-watering amount of money when that first. I mean, that would have been £250 today, wouldn't it?
I think a project like this is clearly not going to be a weekend project, unless you happen to be somebody who's asked to build one for the hobby company, in which it suddenly becomes a weekend project. You know, usually the weekend before Telford. Yes, it's not going to be a weekend project. This is going to be something that you're going to be spending a considerable amount of time building this. So, you know, I would say anybody who kind of like winces at the price, I'd say, well, you could spend a good couple of months building this to a very high standard, or you could spend a couple of months building 4 or 5 kits of equivalent price. What do you want to do? If you really want to build, if you really want one, just don't buy other kits. Just save up and get the one you want.
I think that it's, you know, I sort of often say the same thing. Again, it's a personal thing. If you can afford this, you'll buy it. If you can't afford this, and a lot of people, you know, at the moment, obviously are caring about their jobs and that kind of thing. But I always say that the buying a model kit is really a 3-stage process. If you was buy this kit and open the box and then put it in the loft for the next 5 years, that's a very expensive piece of loft insulation. If you were to buy this kit and then spend the next 100 hours putting this thing together, £150 divided by 100 hours is a lot of entertainment for very little money if you extrapolate it out. And at the end of it, you have a replica that you can display forever. So it's a 3-stage process. You buy the kit, you entertain yourself with it, and then you look at it for the next however many years that it's in your display case. So that's the case. As an RAF enthusiast, I think it's good to see these big jets being done. We often see large kits of American jets or Second World War aircraft. So to see Italeri release a kit of this aircraft and actually be gutsy enough to release the RAF version first, despite the fact they're an Italian company who could have produced Italian and German versions in much brighter color schemes, a la Revell. Revell often will release a kit in a very bright color scheme to begin with, and then do the dowdy versions afterwards. Italeri have gone the other way around. They've gone for the RAF option in quite plain color schemes first. I think that's quite a gutsy move on the part of Italeri, and one that I was slightly surprised by, I have to say.
You mentioned the engines. Now we're gonna disagree about this, because as soon as I saw the initial test shots and I saw that they'd molded the engines, my gut feeling is why I would rather something like that kind of R&D tooling cost was used to better benefit, say for example, a couple of those missing stores. It's to me, it's when you're getting to that kind of price of kit, it's a bit gimmicky. I can understand it, you know, it's kind of like, I can understand it kind of 40, 50 years ago that you used to buy kind of especially Revell kits would always come with like a removable engine, and I know that's always been a function of some of their big 32nd scale kits. I just think at this kind of size and at this kind of scale, it's very nice. It's very nice. But if people really want a separate engine, to display a separate engine or anything like that, just let the aftermarket people do it. Concentrate on what you should be doing. For example, let's talk. We can go to the go-to kit that I think me and Drew have agreed is probably the best 48 scale aircraft kit that's ever been released, and that is the Tamiya F-14 Tomcat.
Yeah, without doubt.
You don't see Tamiya putting engines in it.
No, it should be pointed out. I'm not sure I made this clear. You can't slip the engine in and out.
Yeah,
you can't do that in this kit. You have to make that decision early. So it's not you don't sort of pull it out and play with it.
No, precisely.
There's a section at the back that hooks it in place, so you can't actually do that. I think it's in terms. So really, your only option is that you either display them, you either use them to anchor the rest of the innards in. Yeah.
Or you display them, separately. But if you don't want to display them separately, then you've got two items in the kit that quite a bit of R&D has been spent designing and detailing.
I think
redundant.
I think there's there's definitely an argument for that when you start talking about the stores that are missing. The counter argument to that is that essentially the engines are no more than over detailed jet exhausts, because that's the sort of the length of these things. They're very small engines on a Tornado, despite the fact that it is eye-wateringly loud. So I do have some sympathy with that. I guess it's Italeri following on from what they did with the F-104, and they made that something that could be displayed not only with the engine on display, but with the rear fuselage removed.
Yeah.
So they're adding that section. It's not like they're sort of moving on, but also to sort of counter the Tamiya point. Tamiya's F-16, 32nd scale F-16, included a full engine. So you could see the engine on that model being displayed. So it's almost like Italeri saying, well, we'd like to have a go at something that they've done. But I do agree with you when it comes to things like the F-14 that they didn't go down that road of adding the engines in. In actual fact, with the F-14, it is so perfect, I guess, and all of us have built one. It is so perfect because of its inherent simplicity, that they didn't go down the route of clouding the recipe with additional ingredients that weren't necessary. They just went for the stripped down flavors that were necessary to create something worth enjoying from the bat. So I do understand that, and I think there is an argument with that. Personally, I liked it. I liked that sort of aspect of it, but I'm very aware as part of this assessment that people are going to say, rightly, how come we got two engines, but we didn't get any Brimstone, or we didn't get any Storm Shadows, or we didn't
two engines and one display cradle?
Yes, two engines and one display. Why didn't we get?
It's small things, but I think it's not that I'm being overly harsh, but I think because I'm coming from the perspective that I've kind of worked within the kit industry for more years than I care to remember now. So I do tend to look at kits and think, why did they do that? Because I'm very conscious working with designers. I'm very conscious. In fact, we're going to have one on later this evening. Very conscious of how every single part that goes into a kit has to be justified on a cost basis.
Yeah.
Every single part. It's one of the things that I remember people saying about the Airfix 109, the 48 scale one, and indeed the 72nd scale one, is that it did include the facsimile of an engine at the front. It wasn't brilliantly detailed, but it was just it was a facsimile engine. And the reason why that was there was that they needed something to strengthen the front of the fuselage up.
Yeah.
So the designer went, well, in that case, then I'll just kind of like put in like an engine block there as a just it's more there to strengthen the fuselage up. But if you're going to put a shape there, make it look like an engine. But I tend to look at these kits and I just think, well, you almost want to sit down with designers and say, explain the process of why you chose to do that. I'm just thinking back to that Zvezda Sherman I built, which is a curbside Sherman, doesn't include any any interiors or anything, but it's a straightforward build and it's cheap. It's £25. So
I mean, I don't think judging by the sort of pricing of Italeri kits, which is a debate for an entirely different show and on an entirely different network. I don't really want to go down there at the moment. This kit was never going to be cheap. It was certainly certainly never going to be sub 100 ever.
No.
And that was sort of evident from the costing of the 104. I like I say, I have sympathy, definitely have sympathy with that argument. And I'm sure that in if we were at the national championships now and we were in the bar or tonight and we'd done this and people had sort of seen this at the show, those conversations would go on long into the night. Italeri must have had a design ethos and a plan from day one with this kit.
I mean, don't get me wrong, it's a very impressive kit, and I think our initial assessment when we saw it was that this was a step up again from Italeri compared to the F104s. I completely agree. There is an advancement in some of the molding quality and some of the ideas and things, and I do like the way they've done the wings, to enable you to open everything, because like I say, with Tornadoes, when they're parked up with the wings swept forward, is they use everything just goes bananas on them. Everything opens.
It does,
and also, I do like the, I do like that intake trunking. I think that is more than worthwhile. So I think there are certainly there are things in this that I like more about it than the big Revell kit. Least not that it does appear from the shots of the made-up model that Italeri have got that nose contour and length and everything right. With the Tornado GR versions, with the mud movers, you only have to get one dimension out of that, either in length or in width or the shape and everything, and it just looks wrong. It honestly, it just doesn't look right at all, and it appears that Italeri have got this correct. So one of the most important aspects of this kit is that it does appear to be very accurately shaped.
The one thing that I'm looking forward to more than anything else, more than the assessment and the detail and that, is how this thing goes together. I built a 32nd scale Revell Tornado GR1 that's actually on display at Cosford. It's in their model room in Cosford. And the one thing that's always bugged me about that model, and I can't get away from it, is that one of the wings droops. And despite the fact that I set it up inside the fuselage so that everything was perfectly symmetrical inside that fuselage, when I look at it from the front, the starboard wing drops slightly. The other wing is perfectly flat, how it should be, or perfectly angled how it should be. The other one droops down slightly, despite the fact that there's no way of getting that wing any more orientated in a different way. So I'm looking forward to seeing how this one goes together. Also, I'm looking forward to seeing how this one goes together in comparison to Revell's 48th scale kit, which I built and reviewed 2 years ago, which I don't really sort of want to go through again. So it'll be interesting to see how this goes together. That's something that I'm looking forward to, and like I say, I will be working on that after lunch rather than after my demo. So we'll see, and I think we've got a plan, haven't we, to talk about this again tomorrow, late tomorrow afternoon. I think we're going to have a recap, aren't we, on this kit after I've had a play with it for a few hours. And
I think also a more thorough written assessment at some stage on the Facebook page, listing what we see as the pros and cons. So I think that will be a good service to people. So
and also, if I can be slightly self-indulgent, there is some plans that there may well be a much more thorough assessment of this kit in the pipeline.
You're thinking about doing a book, aren't you?
I am very much thinking about doing a book.
That would
So-
be that would be good. Be an
so
excuse
I'm-
to build some other Tornado models, because you've got the monogram one, haven't you? Just on this one, right? Okay.
I think I may just cover this one. So
Hmm.
we'll have a look at that. I'd like to thank my good friend John Murphy for pushing me in that direction, and Elizabeth for thinking that it was a really good idea. So we may well be sort of seeing, but I'd like to thank everybody for sort of paying attention to those who've watched this. Did we have any other questions about this?
Just general observations. Dave Fleming was asking about the colours. Tim Perry makes the point: see how much golf or scuba diving costs as a POAS time. Apparently, a POAS time. Steve Moores makes the point that's equivalent to 3 nights at the pub. Exactly. It is. The cost of a kit is a deeply personal thing, and it's going to be between you, your wallet, and how much time you are going to spend on it, if you are going to build it at all. And if you're just going to go out and buy it and then not build it, Spencer said, very expensive loft insulation.
Yeah. I play drums. And try doing that. There you go. So,
I do believe that's what the members of Metallica said to Lars Ulrich, but. Oh no, the viewing figures have dropped now because we've just upset all the Metallica fans.
See, you have to do it, don't you? Why do you do this?
I do like Metallica. I do like Metallica. In fact, Metallica do feature on the legendary Rock to Telford playlist, as does your favourite band, Kiss. So as Dave said, he thinks the we've already had this one, but we'll recap it. I think other than the first one, they're all in medium sea grey, camouflage grey for the Telic one. Yeah, they were camouflage grey, aka barley grey. It was the alkali removable temporary finish. It's just mainly comments on the fact that there don't seem to be that many kind of RAF specific weapons in there. Although, again, as we pointed out, that the 4 schemes they've chosen really were weapons light anyway. Yeah. So the actual schemes do fit in with what you're doing, for the kit essentially. But we will cover that more extensively.
And certainly the 9 Squadron aircraft, which I've chosen, which I'll be modelling, ZG775. In all of the photographs I've seen of that, doesn't carry any weapons at all.
No, precisely.
Just carries the tanks. So if anybody's building that jet, fixing weapons underneath it, I think, from what I can see of the pictures, would be completely inaccurate anyway.
Yeah.
So,
and like I say, we can, and you've also got to appreciate Italy. They've got the eye on the larger prize here of putting this out in many European boxings. Now, you can look at that and say, well, the wisdom of trying to be all things to all men and women rather than trying to do a specific variant and do it correctly. And I think this is where this is like the divergence that sometimes happens between kit companies. This is something we might even touch on tonight when we talk to Matt, is that I know that when Airfix choose to do something, they tend to go, right, well, we're just going to do this and that's it.
Yeah.
And people go, well, why aren't you doing this? Why aren't you doing this? And I know, we'll just do this and we'll keep it simple and buildable, but we won't try and overcomplicate it by trying to do, this is why the Hellcat ended up just being an F6, an F6 F5 or 3, I can't remember. F5. They did, 5. They didn't bother trying to do the 3 because the differences were too much, essentially. So,
which was a conversation that me and you had when we were choosing the colour scheme for mine. How much it was so problematic, wasn't it, finding the drones, because every single one we chose was a dash 3.
They were dash 3s, yeah.
They were dash 3s. The one thing I will say before I go, though, is that given the weapons that are included, the German specific weapons, the Cerberus pods and the alarms, points to the possibility of doing a SEAD version in German colours, which is mouth-watering, I have to say, because those aircraft were phenomenally weathered and looked fantastic loaded up with those missiles under the fuselage. So although I'm a massive RAF fan and I build a lot of RAF subjects, the idea of building a German Tornado is absolutely.
Do you know what? I'm just thinking about this because I'm sure somewhere in the depths of my decal folders here, I've actually got a model decal sheet in 72nd scale for the Marine Flieger aircraft. that are in that grey and white scheme.
Yes.
Oh, I've got to build that scheme someday. I really have.
And I'm pretty sure as well, although he doesn't build 32nd scale by his own admission, that there is a certain Sir Drew of Manton of these particular parts who's a huge fan of Tornadoes carrying Cormoran missiles in the original grey and aluminium finish. And I think he would be champing at the bit at the idea of doing that particular aircraft.
I think that's perhaps something we can chat about this evening at tonight's social, which kicks off at 7:30. As like I say, we are now going to go to an intermission, and we are going to be off the air for the next 45 minutes, or well, relatively 45 minutes. Just a reminder that we're back at 2:30. Then at 2:30-ish, we're going to have Jen doing her modelling demo. Then we're back at about 3:45 with a bit of chat, and then we're having around about 4:45, 5 o'clock. We've got Mike Williams coming on with the demo. Then at 5 to 5:30, hoping to have Chris Buchholz on, American modeler and author. He's hilarious, trust me. And then at 5:30 to 6 o'clock, we're having Mr. Matthew Whiting from Airfix to come along to answer all your questions, except for what are Airfix doing next year, which obviously he can't tell you.
Well, I've
so
tried
on that
thumb
note,
screws on you, and you never let any of that sort of information go.
I just managed to boot myself in the studio there. That was,
that was really weird.
That was rather fortuitous, because you were saying you were going to try and extract from me sensitive commercial information.
No, what I said was, I've tried thumb screws on you, and you never let go of any information.
No, I just eject myself from the broadcast so that I don't inadvertently let slip in it. In fact, the worrying thing is I have to angle the MacBook here very carefully, because actually over there in the office, studio/office, there are piles of secret things.
Yes,
that's all I can say. So everybody, thank you very much. This ends the first part of today's broadcast. I think we've got it all up and running. It's been great. Sadly for you, Spencer, having sorted out your camera phone issues that we can see behind you, we haven't had the chance to use it, but never mind. Well, hopefully just leave it where it is now. Don't move it, really. So a big thank you to Drew for kicking off the show, to Ivan for his brilliant demo, and Drew's brilliant demo, and indeed Spencer for giving us this very good in-depth look at the new Italeri Tornado. Like I say, pictures and links have gone up on the Facebook page. So we are going to now have an intermission for the best part of about 35, 40 minutes, and we'll be back at 2:30. So until then, thank you to everybody who's been watching and making comments. Keep them coming. Post your pictures of what you're working up on our Facebook page, and just thanks for showing up and making the day what it is, because you are the people who make the day. So on that note, we'll be back after some light refreshments. So until then, see you in a while.